Chapter 381. Phantom Lord has been disbanded. News of the destruction of Fairy Tale and the destruction of Phantom Lord spread like wildfire across the entire kingdom of Fiori. 3 days after the destruction of 2 guilds capable of competing for the #1 spot in the kingdom of Fiori, the news spread across the entire kingdom of Fiori. Now, as long as one was a citizen of the Fiori kingdom, they would definitely know about this matter. They would know that the guild master of Fairy Tale, Makarov Doria, had a grandson named Noah Doria. They would know that Noah Doria had single-handedly destroyed the guild Phantom Lord, which was on par with his own guild. They would know that the guild master of Phantom Lord, one of the top 10 Saint Magi, Joseph Bala, had been killed by one of Noah Doria's golden wolves. He knew that after Joseph's death, all the branches of the Phantom Lord were disbanded by the various organizations in the council in just half a day. This was to be expected. It was said that the guild master of Phantom Lord, Joseph, had secretly planned to destroy Fairy Tale. However, after the members of Fairy Tale had destroyed Phantom Lord, he went to the council to complain. Because of this incident, Joseph would be stripped of his title as one of the top 10 Saint Magi by the council. After all, the title of the top 10 Saint Magi was only given to sorcerers with good conduct. A sorcerer like Joseph who had committed such despicable acts did not have the right to be one of the top 10 Saint Magi. Furthermore, Joseph had viciously launched a sneak attack on the members of Fairy Tale under the witness of the council's emissary and the entire Night Order. What's more, it was a killing blow. Although Joseph was killed in the end, his actions had already spread throughout the Fiori kingdom. Even if the council wanted to protect Joseph's title, it would be impossible. Under such circumstances, the Phantom Lord, who had lost the leader of one of the 10 Saint Magi, was quickly disbanded. The reason was simple. It was because they had offended too many people. Therefore, not long after Joseph's death, the various branches of the Phantom Lord were besieged by the Dark Guild's magic shooters who had been eradicated by the Phantom Lord. The Dark Guild's magic shooters were also targeted and made things difficult for the Phantom Lord's magic shooters. The magic shooters of the Phantom Lord's magic shooters also attacked the Phantom Lord's magic shooters. As a result, the various branches of the Phantom Lord were either annihilated or disbanded under the pressure of the Phantom Lord. On the other hand, Phantom Lord suffered huge casualties because of Noah. In the end, they could only disband and cease to exist in the form of a guild. And so, 3 days later, the Phantom Lord completely disappeared from the borders of the kingdom of Fiori. In comparison, Fairy Tale's reputation had once again soared. They had solidified their position as the #1 guild in the Fiori kingdom, and their name had shaken the entire Fiori kingdom. However, to the people of Fairy Tale, these were not enough to arouse their interest. This was because while the people outside were talking about this incident, for Fairy Tale, this incident had yet to truly come to an end. This was the Fiori Kingdom's branch of the council. At this moment, Noah was in this branch of the council. In a courtroom-like venue, Noah stood on the witness stand in the middle of the courtroom. In front of him, there was a high platform. At the top of the platform, there was a seat. In the middle of the platform, there were 9 other seats. Other than the top seat, the other 9 seats in the middle of the platform were all occupied. Lifting his head, Noah's gaze swept across each of the people sitting on the platform. His eyes narrowed slightly. These 9 people were the council members. They formed the core of the council, the highest level of the entire Magic Council. In other words, in the council that managed and supervised the various official guilds, like a national public security agency, these 9 council members and the absent president of the council were the highest existences. Now, these people were in the middle of a trial for Noah. Noah Dole. Sitting at the bottom of the platform, a messenger from the council held a piece of paper in his hand and said, "Do you admit to your crime?" When this sentence resounded throughout the court, the group of council members on the platform all looked at Noah. Their eyes were filled with all kinds of emotions. Among them, some of them were friendly, some of them were sizing him up, some of them were malicious, and some of them were taking pleasure in his misfortune. Basically, there were all kinds of gazes. And among these gazes, there was only one that was friendly. It was a short old man. According to Noah's knowledge, this old man's name was Yajima. He was a good friend of Makarov's when he was young. That was why Yajima was so friendly to Makarov's grandson, Noah. In this regard, Noah only responded to Yajima with a smile and then spoke indifferently. May I ask everyone, what crime have I committed? On the platform, a council member named Ogu sneered at Noah and said, I advise you to confess honestly. Otherwise, the crime will only be more serious later. This council member named Ogu was one of the people who looked at Noah with malicious eyes. Apart from this person, there was another council member named Michelo who also looked at Noah with malicious eyes. It was said that these two people were extremely disgusted with Fairy Tail. They had proposed countless times to disband Fairy Tail, but because of Yajima's relationship, it was always delayed. Towards these two people, Noah's attitude was not so friendly. That's why I want to ask, what exactly is my crime? Noah helplessly spread out his hands. Could it be that the council members called me here just to make me confess to a crime that I didn't commit? How rude! Michelo shouted. Are you saying that as council members, we can't distinguish between right and wrong? If that's not the case, then please speak frankly and don't beat around the bush, okay? Noah impatiently waved his hand. If you call me here to convict me like this, everyone will think that you are trying to make things difficult for me, right? Noah Dole. Ogu slammed the table and stood up. Please pay attention to your attitude. As soon as this sentence fell, a cold gaze swept towards Ogu. Oji's face stiffened, and his whole body froze in place. The ones who should pay attention to your attitude are you all. Noah's sharp eyes swept across the council members of the Magic Council. As members of the council, you do have the right to ban crimes, but I never knew that you have the right to shout at people from a high position. Even if you are a sinner, you should still be respected. This is a principle that the royal family of the Fiori Kingdom knows. If the so-called council members are like this, then I should consider whether I should respond to the kingdom and impeach you. As he said this, the corners of Noah's mouth curled up. I believe that when the time comes, there will be quite a few guilds that will be angered by your arrogant attitude and agree with our fairy tale. Hearing this, other than Yajima and the other council members, Ogu, Michelo, and the others' faces turned red. This was because they were angry. These people would never have thought that an ordinary member of Fairy Tail would criticize all the counselors in such a domineering manner and even threaten to impeach them. However, as the enforcer of law and justice, Noah's words were not inappropriate. In other words, unless the council members really wanted to be impeached, they could only swallow this anger in order to protect their status. Chapter 382. Following Noah's forceful speech, the entire court was covered in an oppressive silence. Ogu, Michelo, and the rest of the judges, whose impression of Noah was already bad because of Fairy Tail, had ugly expressions on their faces, but they couldn't say a single word. They could only stand there stiffly without moving. Under such circumstances, one of the counselors who acted as a middleman spoke. Well, everyone, please calm down. We're here to conduct a fair trial as members of the Senate. We can't let our personal emotions affect the fairness of the trial. It'll be even more disgraceful if we get into an argument. Hearing this, Ogu, Michelo, and the others snorted and turned their heads away. Noah, on the other hand, shifted his gaze to the person who spoke, his eyes flickering with a peculiar glint. The person in front of him was about the same age as Noah. He had short blue hair, and on one side of his cheek, with the eye as the center, a sword-like tattoo was engraved on his handsome face. This wasn't the first time Noah saw this face. He had seen it more than once when he was young. At that time, Noah went out to work for the first time as a magic shooter. When he took on a mission, he used that mission as an opportunity to get to know many people. That was when Mira, Elfman, and Lise Anna got to know each other. And during that mission, Noah also got to know two other people. One was like Naz, a dragon whose parents taught him magic went missing, and he met a dragon slayer magic shooter in the forest, Wendy Mabel. The other was a youth who inexplicably fainted in front of Noah and Wendy Jalal. The judge in front of him looked exactly the same as Jalal. When he first saw this person, Noah was shocked and thought that the other party was the youth who called himself Jalal. In the end, after the other party saw Noah, he only looked at Noah with an amused expression. His eyes didn't reveal any other emotions from seeing or hearing Noah's name. Therefore, Noah concluded that this person definitely did not recognize him. As a matter of fact, Noah was even more certain after knowing the other party's name. Zeke Klein. That was the name of the judge in front of him. The other party was not Jalal. But for some reason, this guy called Kieran looked very similar to Jalal. Noah did not know the reason or secret behind this, so he chose to wait and see. However, Noah had a feeling that this guy named Zeke wasn't that simple. "Sir Noah, we have called you here to discuss the matter of Joseph's death," Zeke said to Noah with a smile. "We all know that Joseph destroyed your guild and then ambushed you. Even if he was killed, it could only be said that you were defending yourself. However, some of the people here think that your defense is a little too much, so they want to convict you. Zeke Klein, don't casually stir up trouble. This is just the truth," Michelot said with an unkind expression. Many people saw with their own eyes how his golden wolf defeated President Joseph with an absolute advantage. After President Joseph was defeated, he allowed his servant to kill President Joseph. This is no longer a matter of self-defense. It's possible that it's premeditated murder. "Michelot, your words are a bit too serious." At this time, Ajima spoke. "He's just a child. How could he deliberately kill someone like President Joseph? So what if he is a child? He is Makarov's grandson." Okai said without hesitation. "I definitely don't believe that he didn't deliberately condone it. I think it's inappropriate to judge President Joseph's death as a case of self-defense." Hearing this, Noah laughed. His laughter was unusually harsh. Ogu and Michelot glared at Noah. "What are you laughing at?" "What am I laughing at?" Noah said bluntly. "I'm laughing at you guys. Is there really nothing wrong with your brains? What did you say?" Ogu and Michelot were angry, but what they got in return was Noah's mocking gaze. "I should be the one asking you what you were talking about, right?" Noah looked at Ogu and Michelot with an extremely disdainful gaze. "What did you think I just heard? You said that many people saw my BO defeat Joseph with an absolute advantage, so attacking the defeated President Joseph became a murder. Then, did you properly ask those people whether President Joseph, who was defeated by BO, gave up on killing me?" Noah said to Michelot righteously. "That President Joseph would launch a sneak attack on me when I wasn't on guard. Then, it wouldn't be strange for him to attack me after losing to BO. In order to protect myself, I let BO attack me, and in the end, I killed him. Could this be considered intentional murder?" Michelot was speechless. "And what you said is even more ridiculous." Noah didn't hide his mockery. "You said that you don't believe that I didn't deliberately condone it, then I condone it on purpose? You said that you don't think it's appropriate to be judged as self-defense, then I have to be judged as premeditated murder? Who do you think you are? You." OG's eyes widened, and his face was filled with anger. "In one sentence, if you want to convict me, then show me evidence." Noah glanced at Ogu and Michelot. "If you want to convict me without evidence, then it will only show the selfish desires of some people. I suggest that you guys quickly get rid of such a black sheep. Otherwise, who knows when something big will happen? At that time, all the counselors will have to bear the responsibility. I'm sure that your expressions will be more interesting than I imagined." As soon as he said that, the other counselors' expressions all changed. They all stared at Ogu and Michelot, and their expressions changed. Seeing this, OG's and Michelot's expressions changed, becoming both shocked and furious. This made Noah laugh coldly in his heart. No matter where the so-called high officials were, as long as they had power, then apart from a very small number of people, most of them would become extremely selfish. Just like how the higher one's status was, the more afraid one would be of death. These people would only seek personal gain for their status and power, and were afraid that they would have to bear the responsibility when something big happened. Noah had seen many such people in the world of the Dark Bullet. Therefore, a casual sentence to sow discord was enough to make these counselors fight amongst themselves. And as expected, most of these so-called counselors had their hearts corroded by power and were corrupted by the regime. Therefore, Noah could already predict how things would develop next. Ahem, ahem. A counselor deliberately coughed twice and raised his hand. I think that the evidence to convict Noah Doria is insufficient. We should acquit Noah Doria on the spot. Ogur and Michelo's expressions changed again and again. Under such circumstances, the other counselors began to agree. I agree. I agree. I agree. 3 other counselors followed suit. I agree too. A gorgeously dressed woman also raised her hand. I also agree. Chicharito spread out his hands and said, "Ha, isn't that great?" Ajima laughed out loud. Of course, I can't disagree. You do. Ogur and Michelo were furious at first, but soon after, they looked at each other, and their eyes revealed sullen emotions. If they agreed with Ogur and Michelo to convict Noah without evidence, then once the matter was exposed, the counselors would have to bear the crime of deliberately framing him. Those selfish counselors naturally wouldn't put themselves in such a dangerous position just to agree with Ogu and Michelo. Therefore, the result was obvious. And naturally, Ogu and Michelo also cared about their current status as counselors. In a situation where there wasn't enough evidence, they could only speak sullenly. I agree, I agree. Seeing this, Noah looked at the group of counselors calmly and said, "Thank you for your insight." The group of counselors laughed embarrassedly and made all sorts of declarations of justice. With the situation so clear, the counselors naturally knew what to do. Now, we announce that Noah Doria is acquitted on the spot due to insufficient evidence. Chapter 383. After the end of the trial, Noah walked out of the courtroom without the slightest reluctance. Along with him was Ajima. Thank you very much, Mr. Ajima. Noah still held some respect for Ajima, who was of the same generation as his grandfather and was also a close friend. In addition, Ajima had indeed helped Fairy Tale a lot, so it was only natural for him to thank him. I've really caused you a lot of trouble. I didn't help you at all. You relied on your own strength to make those counselors speechless. It's really Ajima's blessing to have a grandson like you. Ajima didn't seem to care much, but he seemed to enjoy Noah's respect. It was like meeting a polite child, and his face was peaceful. I have rarely seen such a smart and rational child like you in Fairy Tale. Ajima looked at Noah with great satisfaction. I always thought that the young people in Ajima's guild were very impulsive and needed our protection. Now it seems that we are just meddling in other people's business. I'm getting old. Please don't say that, Mr. Ajima. Noah quickly said. I also have impulsive moments, don't you know that? That's right, even that Joseph was killed by you. You were too harsh. Speaking until here, Ajima couldn't help but sigh. However, this time, Joseph really did go too far. He can't blame others for being killed. Although I think it's a bit inappropriate for you to kill him, but seeing your performance today, I don't think you really did it out of impulse. You must have your own considerations, and Ajima must also think so. So he didn't blame you, right? Hearing this, Noah was silent. Noah didn't think that he was wrong to kill Joseph. After all, with Joseph's sinister personality, if he was allowed to live, he would definitely find trouble with Fairy Tale by any means possible. He might even cause Fairy Tale's members to encounter all kinds of dangers because of him. Whether it was from the perspective of protecting his companions, protecting his family, or from Joseph's actions, it was absolutely necessary to get rid of Joseph. However, Makarov and Ajima certainly didn't think so. It should be said that whether it was Makarov or Ajima, they clearly knew the threat that Joseph brought. However, even so, if they were given a choice, they wouldn't kill Joseph. It wasn't because Makarov and Ajima were too kind, but because they had a kind of tolerance for everyone and sincerely hoped that the other person would walk on the right path, even if the other person was evil. Although Noah inherited Makarov's magnanimity, his magnanimity wasn't as great as his magnanimity towards all humans. For example, for a child like the cursed child who was extremely pitiful, Noah would feel distressed and want to save them. Another example was the Holy Son of Heaven, who was somewhat naive but absolutely kind-hearted. Noah would also sincerely help him. But for a guy like Joseph whose heart was evil and rotten, Noah wouldn't casually show his tolerance. Of course, if it was only because Joseph was an evil person, Noah wouldn't have the leisure to specifically kill him. The main reason was that Joseph touched Noah's reverse scale and sent himself to death. Noah naturally wouldn't let him go. In general, Noah still wouldn't find fault with Makarov and Ajima's selfless tolerance, but he also had his own way of doing things. He could be tolerant, but he couldn't be truly selfless. No matter which side it was, it couldn't be said to be wrong. It was precisely because of this that Makarov didn't say anything to Noah. Ajima would also unconditionally help Noah like now, right? In short, little Noah, you also have your own considerations. Little Ma chose to believe you, and I will also choose to believe you. Although your way of doing things is a bit extreme, we don't think you're wrong. Ajima put his hands behind his back, raised his head, and looked out of the window and said earnestly, "Little Pony and I are already old, so we won't be able to take care of Fairy Tale for much longer. As you know, there are many people in the council who don't like Fairy Tale. Once Little Pony and I retire, the guild can only be protected by you two." Little Ma was originally worried that there wasn't a suitable successor for the guild, but I think Little Ma should be relieved now. Ajima nodded with gratification. "Compared to Laxas, Elusha, and Mishgang, I think you are the best successor for the guild. Little Noah, your own guild also needs to be protected by you, understand?" Noah nodded heavily and watched Ajima's back as he left. When Ajima's figure disappeared from Noah's sight, Noah suddenly spoke. "If you continue to hide and secretly observe, I will have to suspect that you have other intentions." As soon as his voice fell, a clap sounded. As expected of an existence that can even kill the 10 Saint Magus Masters. This little trick can't fool you. Accompanied by such a sentence, two figures appeared out of thin air in front of Noah. Looking at the two figures, Noah raised his eyebrows. One of the newcomers was none other than Zeke Klein. The other person had long black hair and was dressed flirtatiously in the inner court of the council. Noah remembered that the other party's name was Yerusha. Looking at Zeke Klein and Urudia, who appeared out of thin air in front of him, Noah frowned inwardly. Under the detection of his outstanding sensing ability, Noah discovered that not only Zeke Klein, but Urudia also seemed to be a little strange. She was completely different from Zeke Klein. If Noah had to put his finger on it, Kieran gave him a strange feeling. It was as if something was very wrong with him. Urudia, on the other hand, gave Noah a strange feeling, as if she was hiding something. With his outstanding sensing ability, Noah could sense these things, but he couldn't go any further. If even Noah's sensing ability couldn't sense anything more, it was enough to prove that Zeke Klein and Urudia weren't simple. Suppressing the suspicion in his heart, Noah looked straight at Zeke Klein and Urudia. "What advice do the two esteemed counselors have for me? Don't tell me you're going to condemn me again? Don't be so nervous." Zeke Klein leisurely raised his hand and made a gesture of surrender. "I don't mean any harm. We're different from those cowardly fellows, little brother Noah." Yerusha smiled charmingly. She didn't do it on purpose, but her every move gave off the vibe of a mature woman. "We're here because we want to see what kind of young man can kill the 10 Saint Magus Grandmasters. We've met in the court, right? Didn't you see enough back then?" Noah curled his lips and smiled. "Besides, the one who killed Joseph wasn't me, but my companion, Golden Wolf Bio. Even if you want to see, you should be looking at Bio, right?" Such a brash tone as expected of someone from Fairy Tale. Urudia shrugged. "Well, although I don't hate it. Don't underestimate yourself, Sir Noah." Zeke Klein looked at Noah with a meaningful gaze. "You're different from those old fogies. I feel that to be able to subdue a golden wolf that has the ability to kill one of the 10 great Saint Grand Magi, as its master, your abilities are definitely not simple." As he said this, Kieran bent down and gave Noah a noble's salute. "I believe we'll have many opportunities to meet in the future." Urudia also gave a slight salute and showed Noah a beautiful smile. "I'll be looking forward to your guidance when the time comes." After leaving these two sentences behind, Zeke Klein and Urudia's figures blurred and disappeared in a flash. Looking at this scene, Noah's eyes flickered slightly. Although he couldn't tell where these two came from, just like what Zeke Klein and Urudia said, Noah also felt that his fate with them wouldn't be limited to this. Besides, Noah's intuition told him that the next time they met, they might not be able to chat like this without any tension. Chapter 384. When Noah returned to Fairy Tale, it was almost noon. After 4 to 5 days, Fairy Tale, naturally still hadn't finished rebuilding. What was supposed to be Fairy Tale's guild building was currently empty, except for the walls that had been built around the outside. Even the ground had not been paved yet, and it was still a piece of yellow soil. In such a place, a temporary workplace similar to a bar had been built. Of course, although it was called a workplace, it was just a simple bar and commission board for the guild members to accept missions. In addition to the simple bar and commission board, temporary rough tables and chairs were neatly arranged on the yellow ground. The guild members were sitting there, killing time. After all, Noah had carved all the runes used to build the defense system into the building materials. Now, he only needed to commission the workers to build it. There was no need for the guild members to be involved in the hard work. Fortunately, the sun wasn't too big today. Otherwise, the high mages of Fairy Tale would have been burnt to death if they were exposed to the sun without anything to cover them. However, as long as one was a magic shooter of Fairy Tale, they would not have any complaints about this. After all, to everyone, the existence of the guild was the most important. They already had a strong sense of belonging to the guild. As long as they could stay in Fairy Tale, they would be satisfied. Except for a few people. Noah, who was about to enter, stopped in his tracks when he heard a voice. "What's going on? This shabby place?" It was an extremely rude and vile voice. Laxus, who was wearing a fur coat as usual, was standing on the yellow ground. He looked around and did not hide his ridicule. "I really can't take it anymore. I was actually reduced to this state by a mere Phantom Lord. Is this still the invincible Fairy Tale?" Hearing Laxus's malicious words, the guild members all lowered their heads. They were angry but did not dare to say anything. Therefore, no one noticed that Laxus, whose face was full of ridicule, looked at the yellow ground, the simple bar, and the commission board of the guild. His eyes slightly trembled and flashed with anger. "Useless. There are so many of you and you can't even protect a guild. As expected, it is because there are too many weaklings and trash in the guild. If I were the guild leader, I would definitely kick out all those people who only know how to eat. Not a single one would be left." Hearing this, Elisha could not help but stand up and look at Laxus with a stern face. "Laxus, what do you mean by this? You still don't understand? Then, let me tell you clearly." No one knew why Laxus was so angry, but it was rare for him to voice out his twisted thoughts in front of the entire guild. "It's precisely because there are too many weaklings in this guild, that's why others have no qualms about finding trouble with us. If we were to clear out all the trash here and create the strongest guild, then how could those rascals have any ideas about Fairy Tale? Do you know what you are saying?" Laxus. Lisanna, who was with Mira at the bar, could not help but speak up. Even the #1 guild in the past, Phantom Lord, had so many magic shooters. Our guild is already considered to have few people, and one of us can beat 10 of them. That is why that kind of guild disbanded, isn't it? Laxus said with a sneer. "It is because there are too many trash in there, so many that even the weaklings here can beat 10 of them. That is why that kind of guild is now at the end of its road. Isn't this enough to make you understand that the strong are the ones who dominate everything? If I inherit the guild, then I will definitely clear out all the weaklings here." Perhaps the news of the guild's destruction had really stimulated Laxus. The agitated Laxus pointed at Lisanna and growled without hesitation. "That's right, it is people like you." Lisanna's eyes widened and she lowered her head, her expression becoming gloomy. "Laxus." Mira, who had been quietly listening to Laxus, suddenly raised her head and stared at Laxus. Her body flashed with a terrifying magic that made people's hearts tremble. "How long has it been since I last saw you like this?" Laxus raised an eyebrow. "I thought that after 2 years, you are no different from those trash who only know how to put on an act. I didn't expect you to have such courage. Well, since you still have this level of ability, then I will reluctantly let you stay in the future. Laxus. Ilusha could no longer bear it and glared at Laxus. That's too much. Lucy and Lebby bit their lips and tried hard not to show their disgust. Damn it. Gray clenched his fists and his eyes were filled with anger. You bastard! Naz rushed towards Laxus with a blazing flame burning in his hand. Against the sudden rise in temperature, he swung his fist in the direction of Laxus. I must teach you a lesson today. Hearing this, Laxus revealed a look of disdain. Before Naz's fist wrapped in flames was about to hit his body, a bolt of lightning flashed all over his body. He directly turned into a bolt of lightning and disappeared on the spot. Hudesh. Naz followed the fist momentum and swung his flaming fist in the air, causing him to lose his balance and almost fall to the ground. Until this moment, a lightning bolt appeared behind Naz. Laxus re-emerged from it with his back facing Naz with a mocking look on his face. However, Laxus didn't notice it. When he just turned into lightning and avoided Naz's attack, a fist swung towards Naz's back as if it was a prophet. Laxus just happened to appear behind Naz, and appeared in front of the fist that was about to strike in advance as if he had foreseen it. Boom! In the next moment, the fist, which was accompanied by a sharp gust of wind, landed heavily on Laxus' face, causing a muffled thud. Good. Laxus, who was punched heavily in the face, directly spat out a muffled groan. His body was knocked away and hit the table and chair beside him. In a burst of crackling sounds, the table and chair there were smashed into pieces. He also fell into the fragments of the table and chair. The sudden change stunned everyone present. When they saw the full appearance of the fist's owner, many of them revealed a joyful expression. Noah, who appeared behind Naz out of nowhere, waved his hand casually as if he had just swatted a fly. He then turned his back to Naz. This punch is for Mira and Lisanna. As soon as the voice sounded, the shattered table and chair were blown away in a burst of lightning, exposing Laxus's figure. Bastard! Laxus, who was wrapped in lightning, looked at Noah furiously. Feeling the pain on his cheek, his expression suddenly became dangerous. You actually dare to attack me? Didn't you say that if you have power, you can do whatever you want? Noah glanced at Laxus. I'm different from a guy like you who treats the weak like dirt. Laxus, I think that the so-called duty of the strong is to protect the weak because the weak exist, the strong have a need to exist. If you only care about power, it's like an object that's too hard and easy to break. You said that if you inherit the guild, you will eliminate all the weak. Noah turned around and looked directly at Laxus. Then I'll tell you, Laxus, if I inherit the guild, I will never let it become the kind of guild that you dream of. You'd better be prepared. The atmosphere in the air suddenly became oppressive. Chapter 385. Everyone in Fairy Tale was staring at Noah and Laxus, who were confronting each other in the middle of the field. They all subconsciously held their breaths, not daring to even breathe. When Laxus heard Noah's words, his eyes widened, then he slowly lowered his head and raised his hand to cover his forehead. After a while, he suddenly laughed out loud. Ha, ha, ha. Looking at Laxus, who suddenly laughed out loud, everyone present looked at each other in dismay. Only Noah stared at Laxus with a calm face, as if he already knew the reason why Laxus suddenly laughed out loud. Good. That's great. This will be interesting. Laxus, who was laughing maniacally, raised his eyes and met Noah's calm gaze. Since you've already said this, then I'll take it as you declaring war on me. Let me see if you have the ability to make me understand. Ha! Amidst a burst of excited, impassioned, and battle-ready laughter, Laxus's body bloomed with golden lightning. His body turned into a bolt of lightning and swept into the sky, disappearing from the Fairy Tale Guild. Looking at Laxus, who turned into a bolt of lightning and disappeared into the horizon, the corners of Noah's mouth slowly curled up, a glint flashing across his eyes. Noah knew that after the destruction of Fairy Tale, Laxus's twisted heart had finally reached its limit. Just like when Fairy Tale had just been destroyed, the magic shooters in Fairy Tale were also depressed because of the collapse of their mental support. Laxus was affected in the same way. However, Laxus's influence was much greater than the others. This was because to Laxus, who did not interact much with the others in the guild and was in a state of cold war with his family, the guild was the last thing in his heart. It was the same as his younger brother, Noah, who treated the guild as his home. With the guild destroyed, Laxus suffered a much greater blow than the other members of Fairy Tail. Therefore, from this point of view, Noah and Laxus were indeed brothers. And now, because Noah had destroyed the Phantom Lord, what would Laxus do because of the same thing? Would he magnify his twisted desires because of his anger and directly attack those in the guild who he viewed as weak and trash? This was not impossible. Therefore, Noah did not hesitate to say those words. This was to fight for justice for Mira and Lysana, and also to shift the target of Laxus's venting onto himself. And because of this, Noah understood. Perhaps, the battle with Laxus that had been dragged on since he was a child could no longer be avoided. Big brother Noah? Lysana, who came to Noah's side, leaned her head on Noah's chest and reached out to hug Noah tightly, as if looking for someone to rely on. It seemed that the words Laxus had said in his agitation had caused her to feel a little down. Then, was Mira affected in any way? Just as Noah was thinking this, Mira walked over and showed Noah the warmest smile, as if she could see through Noah's thoughts. She lightly shook her head, indicating that she was fine. Seeing this, Noah breathed a sigh of relief and patted Lysana's back, comforting her softly. Don't take that guy's words to heart. He was just too agitated because the guild was destroyed. If you're still angry, I'll help you punch him a few more times next time. Lysana's tears turned into laughter. She nodded and her expression became relieved. She leaned against Noah and did not leave, snuggling into Noah's embrace and enjoying the warmth of Noah's embrace. Damn it, Laxus that guy. Naz clenched his fist and shouted. Next time, I'll definitely fight him to the death. He's really getting more and more overboard, Laxus. Gray was speechless. Undoubtedly, he wasn't like this in the past. Why would such a person be the Archmage of Fairy Tail? Lucy asked worriedly. Also, he said that he would inherit the guild. Could it be that he's going to become the leader of Fairy Tail? Isn't that a matter of course? Beside Lucy, Lebby shook her head with a heavy expression. Laxus is the grandson of the leader. If the leader abdicates, then Laxus will most likely inherit the guild. What? Lucy cried out in surprise. How could this be? It's not strange that you don't know about this. Elisha shook her head. Laxus and the leader's relationship has been in a tense state for a long time. People who don't know the situation wouldn't be able to tell that the two of them are family. Then, can that guy really inherit the guild? Lucy's face was full of disgust. I definitely don't want that kind of thing. Don't worry, Luchan. Lebby patted Lucy's shoulder and looked at Noah with hope in her eyes. Noah is also the grandson of the leader. Compared to Laxus, the relationship between the leader and Noah is much better. Moreover, Noah has never disappointed the leader. The leader has always been proud of Noah. If he wants to inherit the guild, the leader will definitely choose Noah. Really? Lucy looked at Noah in surprise and clenched her fist to encourage him. Then Noah, you have to do your best. Don't lose to Laxus. It's too early to talk about this. Noah laughed bitterly. Grandpa is still very healthy, and he won't be willing to part with us children. He won't retire in peace until the day his body collapses. It doesn't matter if it's the leader or Noah, as long as that Laxus doesn't inherit the guild. Lucy puffed up her cheeks. Even if he becomes the guild leader, no one will acknowledge him as someone who doesn't care about his companions. That's right, Noah looked up at the sky and muttered softly. Why can't you understand this logic, Laxus? Hearing Noah's muttering, Mira, Lysana, Elisha, Lebby, Lucy and the others looked at each other and looked at Noah with a trace of heartache. Noah was in a state where he almost went to war with his own brother and was viewed as a one-sided enemy. In fact, he must be feeling very conflicted. When they thought of this, the girls couldn't help but feel heartache in their hearts and remained silent. At this moment, outside the Fairy Tail Guild, a figure silently appeared. It was a mysterious person who was covered in a thick windbreaker and had his face covered. He wore a hat, revealing only a pair of eyes, and carried a few strange-looking staffs on his back. Staring fixedly at Noah, who was surrounded by a group of young ladies, the mysterious man's eyes were filled with astonishment, surprise, and surprise. More than that, there was a nostalgia that couldn't be erased. Not long after, the mysterious person turned into a phantom and disappeared on the spot. At this moment, Noah seemed to have felt something and turned his head to look in the direction of the mysterious person. His eyes were filled with doubt and confusion. Night came quietly. Opening the door to her house, she tugged at Noah's hand and pulled him in with a helpless look on his face. "Big brother Noah. Come in quickly. Why are you so excited?" Noah shook his head helplessly. "It's not the first time I'm here. Do you have to be like this? But you haven't been here for so many years." Lisa couldn't hide her good mood. "My room is completely different from before. I'll take you to see it later." "Okay," Noah replied weakly. Behind Noah's back, Mira watched all of this with a smile and walked in. "Elfman has work, so he won't be back tonight. You can sleep in his room." Elfman went out to work? Noah paused for a moment before coming to a realization. In that case, wouldn't there be only one man and two women left tonight? Chapter 386. Ever since the Fairy Tale Guild building was destroyed, Noah had no home to return to. No, to be more precise, Noah had no place to stay. This was to be expected. After all, the Fairy Tale Guild was Noah's home. This was not just a matter of belonging, but also a matter of living a normal life. Don't forget, Noah lived in the Fairy Tale Guild. This time, the Fairy Tale Guild was destroyed, and Noah had completely lost his place to live. Until the new guild was completed, he could be considered homeless. Therefore, during this period of time, Noah had been living in the guild that had no roof and was only left with a piece of yellow soil. This was not a big deal. Noah had once cultivated outside for 4 years. Deep in the mountains and forests. Wild mountains and forests. Where had he not lived before? Noah had lived in worse environments than this. Thus, in a way that was equivalent to camping, Noah lived in the guild building that had not yet been completed. This matter, until today, was finally discovered by Mira and Lisa. Because they had to clean up the table and chairs that Noah had smashed when he punched Laxes, Mira and Lisa stayed a little longer and went outside to buy new tables and chairs. In the end, Noah, who did not know about this matter, thought that Mira and Lisa had already returned, and leaned against the wall that had already been completed. He directly sat on the ground and fell asleep. Thus, Mira and Lisa, who had returned to the guild, smoothly discovered this scene. Unsurprisingly, the two girls violently shook Noah awake, and with an extremely angry expression, they scolded Noah, saying something about not taking care of himself and so on. Then there was no then. Mira and Lisa, who could not bear to see Noah sleeping in the wilderness, did not hesitate to drag Noah out of the guild building and bring him back to their home. Helpless, Noah had no choice but to comply. However, Noah did not expect that. Elfman was not at home, leaving only Noah, Mira, and Lisa in the house. This was not a very good situation. In the past, it wouldn't have mattered. But now that he knew how Mira and Lisa felt about him, Noah could no longer stay under the same roof as the two beautiful girls. One had to know that the current Mira was as gentle as a saintess. Every action of hers affected Noah's heart. Lisa had long since made love to Noah. How could Noah remain calm when surrounded by these two girls? If it was only Lisa or Mira, then Noah wouldn't be like this. But there were two of them at once. If something went wrong and he couldn't control himself, he would be in deep trouble. Noah, who had fully tasted the taste of meat, was not confident that he could be the same as before. He could not guarantee that he could stay in the same dorm as Julie and Lilith. Even when he slept on the same bed, he would not be able to control himself. At that moment, Noah could only suppress his uneasiness. He laughed dryly and said to Mira and Lisa, "Then I'll sleep in Elfman's room tonight. That's it, good night." With that said, Noah wanted to escape to Elfman's room. However, Just as Noah started to move, Lisa grabbed Noah's hand and forcefully pulled Noah back. It's still so early. Lisana's face was full of dissatisfaction. I still want to show you my room. I'm afraid that after entering your room, I won't be able to bear to come out, girl. If that's the case, Noah bitterly smiled in his heart. Also, because of the conflict with Lax's, you didn't have time to eat dinner. That won't do. Mira put one hand on her waist and cutely puffed up her cheeks as she scolded. You have to take good care of your body. Wait here for a moment, I'll go make dinner for you. After saying that, Mira turned and walked into the kitchen. Big brother Noah. When Mira walked into the kitchen, Lisa hugged Noah tightly and took a deep breath as if she wanted to smell Noah's body scent. Then she smiled sweetly. Do you want to take a look at my room? Feeling Lisana's beautiful figure and the soft touch of her plump breasts, Noah glanced at Mira, who was humming in the kitchen and cooking something. He let out a sigh of relief and hugged Lisa, moving his mouth close to her ear and gently blowing into it. Is it really just taking a look at your room? Hearing such flirtatious words and feeling the hot breath on her ear, Lisa blushed and shyly looked up. Her eyes were suddenly wet. Big brother Noah, if you want to do something else, that's fine too, idiot. Noah's hand caressed Lisana's soft and slender waist as he gently bit her earlobe. Then your sister will definitely find out. I'll hold back and not let big sister Mira find out. Lisa seemed to miss Noah's embrace very much. She buried her head tightly in Noah's chest and spat out hot words. I haven't showered yet. Big brother Noah, let's go in together. Without a doubt, Noah's heart was moved. Even Lisa missed Noah's embrace. As a man, Noah would definitely miss Lisana's soft and delicate body even more. If possible, Noah really wanted to do the same thing as that night, tightly entwining with the beautiful girl in his arms. Thinking of this, Noah's heart also surged with a trace of warmth. Then, just as the man and woman were about to fall into a state where they couldn't extricate themselves and couldn't leave each other, a faintly smiling voice sounded from the side. I was wondering why you were suddenly silent. So you were whispering something that others can't hear? Noah and Lisa were both startled. They jumped away reflexively and put some distance between them. They looked at the source of the voice and saw Mira looking at her grown children. Mira looked like she was looking at her grown-up children. Mira. Noah awkwardly turned his head away. Hee. Lisa seemed to be a little shy, but her mischievous personality didn't diminish as she teased Noah. The shy big brother Noah is also very cute. What are you talking about? Noah pretended to be angry, causing Lisa to giggle. She ran to Elfman's room as if she was escaping, leaving only this sentence behind. I'll go help big brother Noah tidy up his room. Looking at the escaping Lisa, Noah helplessly smiled. Aya. It was only at this moment that Mira stretched out a finger and tapped her smooth chin. Did I disturb you too? Seeing Mira's natural expression, Noah bitterly smiled. Mira, are you also going to tease me? Because... Mira came in front of Noah and looked up at Noah. Her gentle eyes met Noah's gaze, and there were slight ripples in them. Noah only does bad things to Lisa? This sentence caused Noah's heart to beat faster. This expression, this sentence, it wasn't hard to guess what Mira meant. Mira? Noah couldn't help but reach out his hand to Mira. Mira's eyes rippled at almost the same time. Instead of retreating, she moved forward and snuggled into Noah's embrace. She lifted her chin slightly and closed her eyes. At this time, if Noah still didn't know what to do, then he wouldn't be a man. Noah took Mira's lips as she let out a soft whimper. Tsk. Mira didn't know if it was because she didn't want to fall behind Lisa, but she opened her lips and welcomed Noah's tongue into her mouth. She stuck out her sweet little tongue and tangled it with Noah's. After a long while, the two wet lips parted. Just now, you said you wanted to bathe together, right? Mira looked at Noah's face without blinking. Her pretty face was slightly flushed, and her hands were crossed in front of her chest, making her look even more voluptuous than Lisana's. If Noah wants, I can do it too. Noah couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. Ha! Mira tilted her head and looked at Noah with her beautiful eyes. Her red lips moved slightly, and the words that came out of her mouth made Noah's heart waver. "Do you want to see? My buddy. Do you want to see?" This could basically be considered as a useless sentence. Even if it was Noah, how could he not want to see? Chapter 387. Noah had always thought that his self-control was very good. After all, since he was a child, Noah had worked hard to learn to control his emotions at any time in order to not let the overly strong magic power go out of control with his emotions. He became extremely good at this aspect. Later, the ability to not lose control when sharing a bed with Julie and Lilith was mostly thanks to this ability that had been cultivated since childhood. But now, Noah found that his ability to control his emotions was really not that great. Because, even if he was good at controlling his emotions, after hearing Myra's words that were enough to make any man lose control, he still couldn't help but feel his heart beating faster, and even his heart was shaken. "Do you want to see?" Mira, on the other hand, seemed to be doing it on purpose. Her eyes were misty as she repeated the words that made Noah waver. "My body. Me. Mira." Seeing that Mira was still trying to show a gentle smile even though her face was blushing, Noah's voice became a little dry. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. Hee. In this regard, Mira laughed innocently like a prank. Her eyes were fixed on Noah, but her hands were slightly trembling as she put them on the back of her clothes. The next moment, the sound of a zipper was heard. With the sound of cloth friction reverberating, Noah watched the princess dress on Mira slide down from her body, forming a circle with Mira as the center, and fell to the cold ground. Noah only felt that his head had become muddled. Then the princess dress slid down from Mira's body. A large area of snow-white skin was exposed in front of his eyes, making Noah's already messy head even more confused. At this moment, Noah just wanted to exclaim in amazement, because the scene in front of his eyes was too beautiful. It was a beauty that could not be described as a work of art. The scene in front of Noah's eyes. It was so amazing that people couldn't help but marvel. It was as if the curves were specially carved. Between the curves, it seemed that there was something added on it that could definitely attract people's eyes and hearts, making people unable to look away. Noah believed that if it was someone else, even if it was a woman like Mira, they would definitely be attracted by the beautiful body in front of him. Her skin was not as white as snow, but it was enough to be called as white as pearls. Instead of saying that her figure was curvy, it was more appropriate to say that it was extremely enchanting. Undoubtedly, she was a gentle and kind saintess that made people unable to have the slightest ambiguity. Such an existence. When she stripped the last cover on her body, not only did she not lose the sacred and inviolable sense of holiness, but there was also an additional attraction that could make anyone to go crazy. Unsurprisingly, Noah's attention was captured by Myra's figure, and he was completely absent-minded. Noah really didn't expect that Mira would actually take off all her clothes in front of him and become really naked. And it seemed that even Mira herself didn't believe that she would do such a bold thing. Her pretty face was flushed, and her slender arms were also blocking her chest, covering the holy mound that men yearned for. Her delicate body was also trembling slightly. Mira didn't know that although this could serve as a little cover, it made her charm even easier to make people go crazy. Because that pair of extremely plump and round breasts were not something that Myra's pair of slender arms could block. In addition to being able to cover up that captivating red, it made her even more obvious that pair of great breasts on her body. Noah had always thought that Lysana's figure was already considered good. After all, Lysana's figure was also very plump. But who knew that compared to Mira, it was still a little worse. And this difference lay in that pair of plump breasts. From Noah's point of view, Myra's chest was at least 2 times larger than Lysana's. It was very likely that it was even 3 times larger. It made people's blood boil. Therefore, Noah almost uncontrollably reached out his hand towards that sacred place. Noticing Noah's actions, Myra's delicate body trembled, but her eyes never left Noah's face. Although her pretty face was getting redder and redder, her expression was always extremely gentle, and it was getting more and more intense. It turned out that Mira and Lisanna were indeed sisters. Just like how Lisanna would feel shy in front of Noah, but she was still unwilling to reject Noah and boldly showed her beauty to Noah. Mira certainly knew the consequences of not rejecting Noah's outstretched hand. She was definitely very shy and timid in her heart, but she still didn't choose to escape. Instead, she slowly let go of the trembling hand that was blocking her chest, revealing that round longing in front of Noah without missing a single bit. Noah, who clearly knew Myra's feelings, was extremely moved. He stroked his hand on that yearning that couldn't be refused as long as it was a man. What entered his hand was a full smoothness, followed by an indescribable softness. Noah was already quite familiar with this kind of softness, but he still couldn't help but be moved at this time. Thus, Noah subconsciously began to gently knead. Myra's pretty face became redder and redder, and her eyes became more and more blurry. She began to pant lightly, exhaling scorching hot breaths. Her delicate body trembled uncontrollably with Noah's actions. She raised her hand without resistance, puffed out her chest, and offered her most beautiful place to Noah for him to play with as he pleased. Unknowingly, the two's bodies began to draw closer, and their heads also moved closer to each other, tasting each other's lips. The sound of panting. The sound of sucking. Their flirtatious voices reverberated under the eaves of the house that was neither too big nor too small. Not long after, even Noah's clothes fell to the ground at some point. In the next second, a suppressed groan of pain rang out in the hall, followed by a series of muffled groans. The man and woman who were immersed in each other's embrace had long forgotten. They weren't the only ones under the eaves. Sigh. In Elfman's room, Lisanna leaned against the door, listening to the sound of panting and the crisp sounds of collisions from outside the door. She sighed unhappily. Even big sister Mira has become that bad guy's thing? Looks like us sisters can only take advantage of that bad guy. Lisanna sighed faintly and even started to sulk. Damn big brother Noah, he's such a playboy. Forget about big sister Mira, but if he wants to find another woman from who knows where, he'll have to get through me first. Otherwise, this night was especially long. It wasn't only for the man and woman who were immersed in each other's embrace, but also for the woman who was directly entangled in the hall. It was the same for the girl who could only hide in the room and listen to the sounds that constantly tortured her nerves. Everyone. The next day, when Mira returned to the bar counter of Fairy Tale, she had transformed back into the gentle signboard girl. Her face was glowing as she enthusiastically waved at everyone in the guild. Do your best. Oh, the magic shooters, who were planning to accept the commission and join the team to rebuild the guild, cheered excitedly under the cheerful support of the popular masked girl, as if they had been injected with chicken blood. No one knew that the famous masked girl and signature girl of Fairy Tale, who still seemed to belong to everyone, had in fact become the possession of only one person last night without anyone knowing. If they knew, the male archmages who were enthusiastically responding to Myra's greetings wouldn't be as excited as they were now. Instead, they would even have thoughts of committing suicide. Sitting next to Noah, Lebby, who was asking Noah about runic script, asked curiously. It feels like Myra's mood is a lot better than before. Did something good happen? Is that so? Noah laughed dryly. Something good should have happened, right? But Mira is very gentle. To Mira, everyone's good news is her good news. That's why she's always in a good mood. Today, she's even better than before, Rebby said with a puzzled expression. I've only seen Mira this happy once when you came back. Could it be that it has something to do with you this time? Noah was speechless. Chapter 388. It had to be said that a woman's intuition was truly terrifying. Even though it was only a guess, Lebby had guessed the reason why Mira was in such a good mood. Not only is Mira in a good mood, but she has also become prettier. Lebby tilted her head and looked at Mira suspiciously before shifting her gaze in another direction. Compared to Mira, that person's mood seems to be the exact opposite. She seems to be in a much worse mood than before. Hearing this, Noah followed Lebby's gaze and the corner of his eyes twitched. He saw Lise Anna, who was holding a tray and delivering drinks to her companions who were rebuilding the guild. Not only did she not have her usual cute smile, but she also seemed to be in a bad mood. She would occasionally turn her gaze in Myra's direction and faintly sigh. When she turned her gaze to Noah, she would immediately turn her head away in a huff. Anyone with a discerning eye could tell that she was throwing a tantrum. Lebby, who saw this scene, glanced at Noah mockingly. It seems that this person's bad mood has something to do with you. You really have it hard. Noah rolled his eyes at Lebby, but he couldn't find the words to refute her. Who asked Noah to be so distracted by Mira last night that he forgot about Lisana's existence. When he thought of how he had fallen asleep on the dining table in the hall last night with Mira in his arms and woke up in the same position in the morning, the first thing he saw was Lisana's resentful expression and eyes, as well as the faintly visible dark circles under her eyes. Noah couldn't wait to find a hole to hide in. Come to think of it, last night was indeed ridiculous. In the presence of a third party, and this person was also his girlfriend who had an intimate relationship with him. Not only did he spend an entire night with someone else's sister in someone else's house, but when he woke up, the first thing he saw was that he was hugging someone else's sister and lying naked in front of her. No matter how one looked at it, this seemed like a situation that would lead to bloodshed, right? Although it didn't cause any bloodshed in the end, Noah felt rather awkward after being stared at by Mira the entire morning with a blissful expression and Lise Anna the entire morning with a hateful gaze. Lebby seemed to have more or less guessed something. That was why she was making fun of Noah. Embarrassed, Noah could only change the topic. By the way, why don't I see Alusha, Naz, Gray, Lucy, and Hubby? You mean them? Lebby's attention was successfully diverted. She raised her spirits and laughed. I heard that they just formed a team. They should be working together now, right? They formed a team? Noah asked in surprise. Naz and Gray? And Alusha? Noah couldn't help but be surprised. This combination was really strange. Naz and Gray were sworn enemies. They would fight every other day, and the quarrel never stopped. Just like Mira and Alusha in the past, it was also like their magic. Ice and fire were incompatible. For these two people to form a team together, it was not an ordinary kind of strange thing. Needless to say, Alusha, Naz, and Gray were afraid of Alusha since they were young. For them, forming a team with Alusha shouldn't be better than forming a team with a gorilla, right? And Lu Jin is also in that team. Lebby sighed. I know why you're surprised, but Alusha, Naz, Gray, and Lu Jin have been working together recently, so they just formed a team. Now that you mention it, it seems to be true. Noah scratched his cheek. Well, this is also a good thing. I hope those people can get along well. Get along well? Lebby pondered for a moment, and in the next second, she immediately shook her head with sweat all over her forehead. No, absolutely impossible. Ha! Noah couldn't help but laugh. This strange combination, it was most likely impossible for them to get along well. They would definitely quarrel once every 2 or 3 days, right? However, that was also Alusha, Naz, and Gray's style. It would definitely be very pleasant. As for Lucy, Noah wasn't very familiar with her, but he felt that this girl was also an existence full of infinite possibilities. If she joined Alusha, Naz, and Gray, it should also have some kind of catalytic effect and create different sparks, right? At least, Noah believed so. Noah and Lebby, who were chatting happily, didn't notice that around them, several pairs of eyes had been staring at them fiercely, full of resentment, dissatisfaction, and indignation. Is it Lebby this time? Lise Anna shouted angrily. Big brother Noah is really a playboy. Well, Mira comforted Lise Anna with a smile. Although the atmosphere seems to be good, Lise Anna should be able to tell that Noah and Lebby don't have that kind of feeling, right? Not now doesn't mean that they won't in the future. Lise Anna retorted. It's not hard to cultivate feelings, especially for big brother Noah. That's true. Mira smiled bitterly, looking at Noah with an extremely gentle gaze. We are well aware of how attractive that man is. Isn't that so? Lise Anna puffed out her cheeks and looked in another direction. Jet and Troy are also having a hard time. Mira followed her line of sight and saw Jet and Troy hiding in a corner, staring at Noah and Lebby who were chatting with each other. Tears flowed down their cheeks as they bit on a handkerchief in their hands. Mira couldn't help but smile. I can't watch this anymore. Lisa couldn't take it anymore and jumped out. Big sister Mira and I are here already. Big brother Noah, you definitely won't be able to touch Lebby. With that said, Lisa was about to walk in the direction of Noah, but her head suddenly felt a little dizzy. Feeling her vision blur, Lisa let out a strange cry. Then, an indescribable drowsiness rushed into her mind. It wasn't just Lisa. Even Mira felt a little sleepy all of a sudden. She held her head and leaned on the bar counter. Noah, who was talking to Lebby, raised his head as if he sensed something and furrowed his brows. Is this a sleeping spell? That's right. Someone was using a spell that could cause people to fall into a deep sleep. This was because Noah could feel that the air of the entire fairy tale guild was filled with a magical power, causing waves of undulations, causing those who were affected by this invisible undulation to feel sleepy. What's wrong? Seeing Noah's furrowed brows, Lebby only had time to say this before her eyelids began to close. In the entire fairy tale, except for Noah, everyone was affected by the sleeping magic. Furthermore, seeing that no one was able to escape the effects of the sleeping spell wasn't just any ordinary spell. The person casting the sleeping spell was definitely not an ordinary person. If not for the fact that he didn't sense any malicious intent, Noah would have acted long ago. Of course, the reason he didn't act wasn't just because Noah didn't sense any malicious intent. It was also because the magical energy that permeated the entire guild seemed to have intentionally bypassed Noah. In other words, Noah wasn't among the targets of the sleeping spell. This feeling. In the direction of the bar, Mira seemed to know what was going on and revealed a relieved expression. She hugged Lisa as she lay on the bar and fell into a deep sleep. Mr. Gang. Lebby seemed to know who the sleeping spell was as well. After saying this name, her eyelids closed and she fell towards Noah's direction. Noah instinctively hugged the upside-down Lebby and glanced at Mira and Lisa who were sleeping soundly at the bar. He then looked around. He saw that everyone in the guild had fallen to the ground and had fallen into a deep sleep. Noah furrowed his brows as he looked in the direction of the guild gate with narrowed eyes. It's time to come out, right? As soon as he said this, a gust of wind blew in the direction of the entrance. Not long after, a figure silently appeared there. The newcomer was wearing a windbreaker and was dressed strangely. On his back were a few strangely shaped staffs, and he wore a hat and a mask. Noah, with his senses fully activated, found that he couldn't detect any magical energy from the newcomer and couldn't help but become cautious. Chapter 389. Looking at the mysterious person slowly walking into the guild, Noah remembered the name that Lebby, who was in his arms, had mentioned before she fell asleep. Mishgang? He's Mishgang? In addition to Kildas, there was one of the 3 S-rank sorcerers in Fairy Tale who was known as the strongest backup sorcerers Mishgang. Unlike Elisha, who often interacted with his companions in the guild, and Laxus, who did not have a good relationship with his companions, this S-rank sorcerer named Mishgang was mysterious. Noah heard that ever since Mishgang joined Fairy Tale, he would use sleep magic every time he went to the guild, making everyone in the guild fall into a deep sleep, except for showing his face once during the S-rank magic shooter advancement exam. Thus, Noah heard that apart from Makarov, no one in Fairy Tale had seen Mishgang before. This enigmatic sorcerer, until now Noah realized that it was not just for show. Too mysterious. Even with Noah's outstanding senses, he could not sense even a trace of mana from Mishgang. It was obvious that Mishgang was not as simple as he looked. Of course, Noah did not think that there was another possibility that he could not sense mana from Mishgang. Mishgang had no mana at all. However, to be able to become the S-ranked magic shooter of the Fairy Tale and use such a powerful sleep spell, how could there not be any magic on her body? Because of this point of view, Noah subconsciously ruled out this possibility, but he did not expect that this was the correct answer. Noah, who did not know this, found it strange that Mishgang deliberately avoided using sleep magic on him. Although Noah felt that this level of sleep magic was not enough to affect him, Mishgang clearly had a purpose for doing so. Mishgang was here for Noah. It was that simple. However, for some reason, Noah felt that Mishgang's aura was a little familiar. While he was suspicious, Noah also cast his gaze on Mishgang and spoke first. "Are you Mishgang? Although I heard rumors, I did not expect that you would actually hypnotize everyone in the guild when you appeared. What's the point of that?" After hearing Noah's words, Mr. Gang stopped in his tracks. After a moment of silence, he uttered these words. "Because my appearance is not suitable for others to know." As he said this, Mishgang suddenly reached out and removed his headscarf and face cloth, revealing his true appearance that no one knew about to Noah. Noah was stunned at first, but when he saw Mishgang's appearance, his pupils shrank. Noah had seen that face a few days ago. Short blue hair, a familiar face, and a sword-shaped tattoo above and below one eye. It was none other than Zeke Klein. It wasn't Zeke. Noah said in shock. "You are Jalal?" Noah finally remembered. That's right, Mishgang's aura was exactly the same as Jalal's aura that he had encountered in the forest. The most mysterious S-rank sorcerer in the history of fairy tale was the same Jalal that Noah had met in the forest when he was young. The same Jalal who had been running around in order to stop an unknown super subspace magic called anima. "Call me Mishgang." The former friend showed a gentle smile to Noah. "To be honest, if you can call me that, it will be a lot more convenient for me." "You came to fairy tale?" Noah looked at Jalal with surprise. "No, it should be Mishgang." "Don't you need to stop that anima thing?" "I am now wandering around the world, stopping the activation of anima everywhere." Mishgang stopped smiling, and his expression more or less carried a hint of helplessness. "However, traveling everywhere also means that I need to have sufficient travel expenses. For the sake of living, I can only find a guild to join and work while traveling. Because you're in fairy tale, I thought of coming here, but after I arrived, I found out that you had already left." Noah had left fairy tale for a full 6 years. Mr. Gang had probably joined fairy tale in the past 6 years, but Noah was coincidentally not in the guild, so they hadn't bumped into each other. Now that they had finally met, it was only now that they had finally met. "It's not easy for you." Knowing that Mishgang was the Jalal that he had met when he was young, Noah's mood became better, but he quickly thought of something and hurriedly spoke. "What about Wendy? Where did Wendy go?" When they parted ways with Mishgang, Noah left Wendy in Jalal's care. Now, Mistgang had joined fairy tale, and he had joined fairy tale for quite some time. Then, where was Wendy? Could it be that an accident had happened? "Don't worry, nothing happened to Wendy." Sensing that Noah's face was gradually darkening, Mishgang quickly understood what Noah was thinking and hurriedly spoke. "I put Wendy in a good place, and she is now living there." "Put Wendy in another place?" Noah frowned. "But when I was bringing Wendy to look for Grandine, I encountered anima." Mishgang sighed. "Because it would cause a great disaster if it was allowed to activate, so in order to stop it, I could only put Wendy in a safe place. After all, it would be too dangerous for Wendy to get close to the anima." "Is that so?" Noah's brows relaxed little by little. "Then where is Wendy now?" "I put Wendy in a guild," Mishgang answered honestly. "That guild is called Cat Shelter." "Wendy is in Cat Shelter?" Noah sighed in relief. "Good, it's not a hard place to find." Although it hadn't been long since he returned to this world, Noah had enough information about this time period, including some of the more famous guilds. Cat Shelter was one of them. Knowing that Wendy was in Cat Shelter, Noah was slightly relieved. Then, he stared at Mishgang's face and hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Actually, I met a guy called Kieran in the council. That guy looks exactly like you." Mr. Gang's expression froze, and his eyes became uncertain. Seeing this, Noah was sure that Mishgang knew about Kieran's existence. "If there's a reason that you can't explain, it's fine if you don't say it." Noah looked at his childhood friend in front of him and said, "But, as long as it's within your means, give me some information. I'm a little concerned about that guy. You're right to be concerned about him, Mishgang said in a deep voice. I know about Kieran's existence as well. He's not a simple person. Mishgang hesitated for a moment, then seemed to give up on something and said to Noah, if I'm not wrong, Kieran must be related to Jalal. Jalal? Noah was completely stunned. Jalal? Wasn't that Mishgang? You might be surprised, but I still have to tell you. Mishgang looked at Noah solemnly and said, actually, there's another person who looks exactly like me and Kieran. His name is Jalal. Hearing this, even Noah felt that he couldn't react. There was another person who looked exactly like him? Could it be that that face was very popular in this world? Chapter 390. Noah looked at Mr. Gang's back as he walked away from Fairy Tale. Only when Mr. Gang's figure disappeared from his sight did he look down at his hand. There was a piece of paper in his hand. There was an address written on it. It was a set of coordinates on the ocean. Paradise Tower? That was the name of the location that Mr. Gang had given Noah. According to Mr. Gang, it was a place where people were treated like slaves. It was like hell. The so-called Jalal that Mr. Gang had mentioned was in the Paradise Tower. For some reason, Mr. Gang seemed to be very concerned about this person called Jalal. He had specifically investigated this matter, and the results of his investigation were the coordinates in Noah's hand and the name of the Paradise Tower. Why would Jalal be in a hell where people were treated like slaves? Why would Mr. Gang use the name Jal to introduce himself when he was young? Why would Mr. Gang care about Jalal so much? Why would Mr. Gang, Jalal, and even Kieran look exactly the same? Mr. Gang did not say any of this. However, Mishgang said so. If you care about Kieran, it's best to start investigating this Jalal. The relationship between the two of them is definitely not ordinary. I feel that there is a very important connection between the two of them. However, I've been investigating too little, so I can only vaguely make some judgments. After that, Mr. Gang left a message for Kieran. I really have nothing to do with this Jalal. I only know of his existence. If you want to investigate him, then go to the Paradise Tower. However, don't bring Alusha along. It's best if you don't tell Alusha about this. After saying this, Mr. Gang left, leaving Noah with the coordinates of the Paradise Tower. Noah had no interest in Jalal, Kirkine, or the Paradise Tower. The reason why Noah asked about Mr. Gang was because the two looked too similar. Even their auras were vaguely similar. Moreover, he had a bad premonition in his heart, which was why Noah asked about it. As mentioned before, Noah's intuition was very accurate. That was why Noah said that he cared about Kieran. Now, Noah finally understood why he cared about this matter. Because of Alusha. He had a bad premonition before, but when Mishgang mentioned Alusha, it rose to the top. Connecting the dots, Noah felt that Alusha definitely had some sort of relationship with that Jalal or the Paradise Tower, and it was a very bad one at that. That was why his intuition had suddenly reacted to Kieran. Tightly holding the paper in his hand, Noah murmured, "Looks like there's a need to investigate." As soon as he said this, a shy voice sounded from Noah's arms. "No matter what you want to investigate, I'll help you. But before that, can you let go of me?" Noah was slightly startled. He lowered his head reflexively and looked at his arms. Then he saw her. She looked at Lebby, who had her hand on her chest and her petite body was twisting slightly. She seemed to be a little uncomfortable, and her face was flushed red with shyness. At this moment, Noah was tightly hugging Lebby's extremely slender waist, pressing her into his embrace. Their bodies were tightly pressed together, and Noah could even faintly feel the pair of small softness and Lebby's drumming heartbeat. Feeling Lebby's rapidly beating heart as if it wanted to jump out of her chest, Noah finally reacted. However, before he could let go, a low voice sounded from behind Noah. "How long do you plan on hugging her?" Brother. Noah shuddered and abruptly let go of Lebby. He jumped up and distanced himself from Lebby. Yes. I'm sorry. I didn't do it on purpose. I know. I still have memories before I fell asleep. I still remember falling in your direction before I fell asleep. Lebby also tidied her clothes and smiled awkwardly. Noah must have hugged me to prevent me from falling to the ground, right? Hearing this, Noah could not help but laugh dryly. Rather than saying that he hugged Lebby to prevent her from falling to the ground, it was more accurate to say that because of the appearance of Mr. Gang and the information it brought, Noah had long forgotten that Lebby was still in his arms. Furthermore, the reason he hugged Lebby was because he saw Lebby leaning towards him. Although Noah did have a gentle side, this time, he did not hug Lebby because he had such a considerate intention. It was truly a sin. Brother Noah? On the other side, Lise Anna looked at Noah with a fake smile. Although I can roughly guess what happened, I still want to ask. You didn't do it on purpose, right? No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Noah shook his head like a rattledrum. I definitely didn't do it on purpose. Really? Lise Anna looked at Noah suspiciously and said unwillingly. Then I'll forgive you. Noah laughed bitterly. Had it been her usual self, she wouldn't have shown such obvious suspicion even if she didn't have absolute trust in Noah's words. Obviously, because of what happened last night with Mira, Lise Anna was agitated. Don't be awkward. At that moment, Noah hugged her from behind and rested his chin on her shoulder as he said softly, Don't worry. I know it's my fault, and I also know that Lise Anna will definitely forgive me. I also know that you don't mind that I have Mira, but you feel bad, right? Perhaps it was because of Noah's hug, Lise Anna finally stopped being awkward and revealed her inner thoughts. I'm not as pretty as Sister Mira, and I'm not as gentle as her. Now that Brother Noah has a better Sister Mira, I don't know if he'll forget me. You're such an idiot. How many years have you known me? Am I that kind of person? Noah gently bit Lisanna's earlobe. If you say something like that again next time, I'll have to punish you. All right, I won't say it again. Lise Anna playfully stuck out her tongue and gave her body to Noah. She leaned into Noah's embrace, her face finally showing her usual cheerfulness. Although she didn't receive a pledge of eternal love from Noah, nor did she receive any sweet nothings from Noah, Lise Anna, who understood Noah, knew that such words were equivalent to a promise from Noah. Noah was indirectly telling her that he would never forget her. That made the little bit of uneasiness in her heart disappear, leaving behind only the warmth and happiness of a lover. Immersed in the warmth, the two of them had long forgotten where they were. Before long, Myra's helpless voice sounded in their ears. You two, can you do this kind of thing when we get back home? Noah and Lise Anna were both startled. They raised their heads and looked around, only to discover that at some point everyone in the guild had woken up and surrounded them. You really surprised me. Kana looked at Noah with a teasing gaze. I didn't expect that not only Mira, but Lise Anna as well? Noah? Levi covered her mouth with a look of surprise. You plan to date both Mira and Lise Anna at the same time? Damn it. Jet and Troy were even more enraged. It's not just Levi, you even hugged Lise Anna, you hugging maniac. Yes. The male sorcerers in the guild all cried out in resentment. You bastard, you're so enviable. You're too bold. The female sorcerers also laughed out loud. Since Mira, Lise Anna, and Levi all have a chance, Noah, why don't you give us a chance too? Levi was stunned and hurriedly clarified. No, it has nothing to do with me. As she said that, Levi seemed to recall Noah's hug just now. Her cheeks turned red again, and she kept sneaking glances in Noah's direction. Seeing this scene, Jet and Troy burst into tears. Chapter 391. The sun was setting in the west and the sky was filled with the glow of the sunset. With the help of the sparse light, Noah, who was holding a box in his hand, pushed aside the bushes and passed through the trees. After passing through a small path, the scene in front of him began to open up. Not long after, an open space with a clear river appeared in front of Noah. And on the bank of the river, a girl with eye-catching crimson long hair was waiting there. Ha ha! Amidst the awe-inspiring shouts, Elisha, who was wearing her usual ice-cold armor, held a knight's sword in one hand. Like a valkyrie descending from the sky, She nimbly ran back and forth on the bank of the river while waving the knight's sword in her hand at an extremely fast speed, bringing about waves of sword light. Clang, clang, clang. The crisp sound of the sword striking the air was like the sharp sound of something breaking through the air. Looking at Elusha's ghostly figure and the waves of sword light that flashed one after another, Noah felt as if he was looking at Elusha, who was diligently practicing her swordsmanship on the bank of the river when she was young. He couldn't help but let out a gentle smile. In the blink of an eye, so many years had passed. Whether it was Noah or Elusha, they had both grown up. Unlike the Elusha who could only use her swordsmanship in a clumsy way to grow up, the current Elusha's swordsmanship had already reached the acme of perfection. It was far from what the past could compare to. Moreover, Elusha was no longer the novice magic shooter who couldn't even obtain a work permit and could only stay in the guild to temporarily hone her magic. Instead, she was a true powerhouse. She had obtained the title of one of the 5 S-rank magic shooters in Fairy Tail, and also obtained the title of Fairy Queen. She was known as the strongest female magic shooter in Fairy Tail, and was also one of the strongest candidates for a true powerhouse. Thinking of this, Noah felt as if the events of his childhood were still vivid in his mind. One by one, they flashed through his mind, causing Noah to be immersed in the memories of his childhood. Unfortunately, this memory did not last for long. Noah? As a surprised voice sounded, the sword lights flashing on the riverbank all disappeared. Noah came back to his senses and looked in front of him. He saw Elusha's 2 night swords turning into rays of light and disappearing into Elusha's hands. Elusha turned her gaze towards Noah and said in surprise, "How strange, you actually came here. What do you mean by that?" Noah shook his head in amusement. He walked forward to the riverbank and looked at the flowing water in the clear river. "This secret base still belonged to me, didn't it? If I didn't want to learn sword skills from you, you wouldn't know this place, right? Why are you saying it as if it's your own? Speaking of which, there seems to be such a thing." Elusha couldn't help but chuckle. She came to Noah's side and stood side by side with Noah, looking forward. "I've been cultivating here all this time. I almost forgot that you were the one who brought me here. I didn't expect you to keep coming here. If it weren't for Mira and Lisanna telling me, I would still be in the dark." Noah shrugged. "If I told Naz and Gray that you've been cultivating here almost every day, they would definitely understand why you're so strong, right? Don't say that. The 2 of them have been working very hard." Elusha turned her head and said to Noah in confusion, "Now that you mention it, it seems like you haven't been here for a long time." "That's right." Noah sighed as he said this. "After all, if it's just pure training, it's already very difficult for my strength to improve. Now, if I still want to become stronger, blindly training won't work. I need to temper myself in actual combat or life and death battles, or find another way to improve. Naturally, the chances of coming here have decreased, and it's very difficult to come again." "That's true." After hearing Noah's words, Elusha also recalled Noah's outstanding close combat ability and unfathomable strength. She couldn't help but sigh. "You're now indeed above me. When will I reach the level where you can't rely on pure training to become stronger? That will prove that I've more or less caught up to you, right? Don't flatter me. You're already very strong." Noah pursed his lips and sat down on the ground. He placed the box in his hand on the ground. "I brought you a gift of consolation." With that said, Noah opened the box and exposed the thing lying in the box to the air. It was a strawberry cake. Ilusa's eyes lit up, and she immediately sat down on the spot. Without hesitation, she grabbed the cake on the ground, picked up the fork placed in the box, and took a bite. Then, she said to Noah in a slightly cheerful tone while savoring the aftertaste, "It's still as delicious as always. Just as delicious as always." Looking at Elusha, who only behaved like a young girl in love when facing her favorite food, Noah couldn't help but smile. "I thought compared to before, the cake shop in Magnolia City has improved a lot in the way of making cakes, and the taste will also improve a lot." Hearing this sentence, Elusha was startled. "Don't tell me you haven't tasted it before? Compared to sweet things, I prefer to have a lighter taste." Noah casually responded. "And just as I said, this is a gift of consolation for you. Elisha took another bite of the cake and held the box containing the cake. Her tone became ethereal. Really? Eating the cake you brought? I can't help but think of the scene when you first gave me a cake when I was a child. At that time, Elisha had some problems with one of her eyes and used a medical eye patch to cover it. She was a quiet child who only knew how to stay in the corner of the guild and sit quietly by herself. At that time, I had just joined Fairy Tale not long ago. You were the first guild member who interacted with me. Just like now, you gave me a cake. Elisha shifted her gaze and looked at Noah again. Actually, I always wanted to ask you at that time, why did you want to give me a cake? Hearing this, Noah went silent. But why did he want to give Elisha a cake and interact with Elisha? Noah did not forget his feelings at that time. When I first saw you, I knew that you were a person with a lot of stories, Noah said indifferently under Elisha's gaze. Elisha, in fact, in your heart, there has always been a part that no one can touch, right? Hearing this, Elisha's expression froze, and the light in her eyes also froze. Such a young child, to be able to resist playing with others in such a crowded place, either you are afraid of strangers, or you must have a reason to do so, Noah said as if he did not notice Elisha's change. But no matter how I look at you, you don't look like someone who is afraid of strangers, so I think you must have a past that you can't talk about, and it is definitely not a good past. Is that so? The expression on Elisha's face disappeared, and the gaze she looked at Noah became uncertain. So, at that time, did you do that because you sympathized with me? Sympathized? Noah laughed and shook his head. It would be good if it was sympathy, but unfortunately, at that time, the only feeling I had was envy. Envy? Even Elisha was stunned when she heard this. Envy? Envy that she was alone? Envy that she had a bad past? Was this something to be envious of? If it was someone else who said this, Elisha would definitely think that the other party was mocking her, but Noah was not that kind of person. Then what did this sentence mean? Even if you have a bad past, a painful past, or even a desperate past, it is still a past that belongs to you. As if Noah saw through Elisha's thoughts, his expression became complicated. Having a past that can prove your existence, isn't it worth being envious? Elisha was stunned, and immediately seemed to have thought of something. She fell into silence, unable to speak. Chapter 392. In Fairy Tale, very few people knew anything about Noah before he joined the guild. Now in Fairy Tale, except for the old members who had existed before Noah joined Fairy Tale, the rest of the members thought that Noah was Makarov's grandson. Only the old members knew that Noah was adopted by Makarov. However, even the old members only knew that Noah was an orphan who was adopted by Makarov after meeting him by chance. They did not know why Makarov adopted Noah. After all, Fairy Tale had always accepted many orphans from all over the world. People like Elisha, Naz, Gray, Mira, Lisanna, and Elfman had all joined the guild when they were young, but none of them had been adopted by Makarov. Then, why did Makarov only adopt Noah as his grandson? As a childhood friend who grew up with Noah, Elisha naturally knew the reason. It was because Noah did not go there. According to Makarov, Noah seemed to have appeared in this world out of thin air. There was no trace of him living, existing, or leaving behind any traces, and no memory of anything before the age of 10. In Noah's memory, the first scene was when he met Makarov in the nameless forest. After meeting Noah, because of Noah's memory loss, Makarov did not hesitate to ask around about Noah's background. He helped Noah search for possible relatives and hometown, but the final conclusion was that Noah seemed to have appeared out of thin air. There was no trace of him ever existing. Under such circumstances, Makarov could not sit by and watch Noah, who did not even know who his biological parents were, appear in this world as if he had never existed. Therefore, he resolutely accepted Noah as his adopted grandson, hoping to bring him some familial warmth. To be honest, Elisha could not imagine how Noah felt when he had just joined Fairy Tale. He had no memories of his past, and he knew that he did not have any place in this world where he could or had ever existed. That kind of emptiness, blankness, and blankness made Elisha shudder when she thought about it. Once, Elisha also had such thoughts. How good would it be if she could forget the past? But now that she thought about it carefully, was it really good to not have a past? Just like what Noah said, even if the past was bad, painful, or even desperate, it was proof of her existence. Compared to this, a life without a past, without any evidence of existence, that was the real horror. Fortunately, Noah met Makarov and joined Fairy Tale. He had a place that could prove his existence. Otherwise, Elisha felt that at that time, Noah, who had nothing in the real sense, would definitely be living a life worse than death. It would be like being in hell. I know that you may be very angry when I say this, but at that time, I really envied you. Noah laughed bitterly. Then, when I came to my senses, I had already unknowingly developed the idea of getting close to you. Everything that happened after that happened naturally. I'm sorry, Elisha said in a low tone. I reminded you of the bad past. We're the same, right? Noah sighed slightly. Am I not the same? I reminded you of the bad past? But I'm really grateful to you. Elisha's tone became sincere again. If it weren't for your share of the cake, perhaps there would never be today's Elisha Chocolito. You are the third person in this life to save me. The third? Noah looked at Elisha in surprise. Have you been saved by so many people? Yes, without you, I would have disappeared long ago. Elisha laughed self-deprecatingly. Because of Grandpa Luobu's rescue, I survived the hands of a group of demons. Because of your rescue, I have a new life, and perhaps even Elisha herself did not realize. Elisha's hands had long been clenched tightly, and even a touch of pain appeared on her face. Angelo? These words were uttered in an inarticulate accent that bordered on the utterance of a dream. However, Noah heard it clearly. He heard it clearly. Therefore, when the name Jalal drilled into Noah's ears, Noah's heart suddenly tightened, and his hand subconsciously reached for his pocket. In that pocket was lying the paper with the address of the Paradise Tower written on it. At this moment, Noah finally confirmed his previous guess. Sure enough, Elisha and Jalal had an extraordinary relationship with the Paradise Tower. That was the corner of Elisha's heart that no one had been able to touch, a secret that even Noah had no way to know. Since childhood, Noah knew that Elisha's heart must be hiding an extraordinary secret. Now, Noah had finally touched the tip of the iceberg of this secret. Don't think about the bad memories anymore. As his heart began to become active, Noah looked at Elisha, who had a somewhat painful expression on her face, and changed the topic. Although that's also proof of your existence, if one doesn't look forward, there's no way to move forward. You won't be able to move forward, and you might even fall back. That's not the Elisha I know. Elisha lowered her head, and in the next second raised it up again, regaining her previous heroic spirit. Is that so? That's true. With that said, Elisha suddenly leaned her head on Noah's shoulder, and her armored hand tightly hugged one of Noah's arms. Just a little, let me lean on you, Noah, who was a little surprised that the always strong Elisha suddenly showed such a weak behavior, slowly relaxed his expression and body. He also raised his other hand and gently stroked Elisha's head, just like coaxing a child to sleep. No matter when, if you want to borrow it, I will lend it to you. So, please don't be shy and lean on me. After all, we grew up together since childhood, and no one can replace family. Hearing Noah's words, Elisha's slightly cold heart gradually warmed up, and a touch of peace and comfort appeared on her delicate face. She closed her eyes as if falling into a deep sleep, and didn't speak for a long time. Under the setting sun, a man and a woman leaned on each other by the clear river bank until the sun went down, and it was still the same as before. Of course, Elisha didn't know. At this moment, Noah secretly made a decision. In the living room of the Strauss siblings' home, Lise Anna suddenly stood up and looked at Noah with a face full of anxiety. Big brother Noah, you're leaving again. Noah? Myra's gentle expression, which had always been gentle to Noah, dimmed. She seemed to have suffered a blow like Lise Anna. Seeing this, Noah knew that Mira and Lise Anna had misunderstood. Don't worry, I'm not going to cultivate this time. It's just that there's something I want to do, and there's a place I want to go to, Noah hurriedly said. If there are no accidents, I'll be back in about 10 days, or a month at most. It's very likely that I'll be back in 2 or 3 days. I won't be leaving for that long. Hearing this, Mira and Lasana's expressions brightened, and they breathed a sigh of relief. Are you going to work? Lisanne asked. Can I go with you? No need, I'll be fine by myself. Noah scratched his cheek. I'm not going to work, I just have something to do. Don't worry. Seeing that the two sisters were still a little worried, Noah comforted them. Don't forget, even if you're worried about me, I have Bio by my side. Nothing will happen. Then do you need me to prepare anything for you? Mira asked considerately. You don't have any money on you, right? What about the travel expenses? Noah was speechless. Let me and big sister Mira prepare the necessities for your trip. Lisanne smiled mischievously. We'll also prepare the travel expenses for big brother Noah, don't worry. Noah could only laugh dryly, speechless. This time, he really was suspected of living off a woman. Chapter 393. Walala. The waves rolled back and forth in dazzling ripples, surging into the distance. There was an endless ocean here. Above the ocean, a stream of light flew across the ocean at an extremely fast speed like a meteor in the daytime. With a sharp whistling sound, it disappeared in the space. It didn't take long before it disappeared into the horizon and appeared in another place. With the help of the death feather form of the magician, and speed none, Noah was flying towards the distant ocean at a speed that ordinary ships couldn't compare to. At this time, Noah, who was flying over the ocean, was holding a map in his hand. There was an extremely obvious X symbol on the corner of the map. That X symbol was Noah's destination this time, Paradise Tower. To be honest, Noah didn't want to delve too deeply into Alusha's past. After all, everyone had secrets that they didn't want to tell others. However, this time, Noah intuitively felt that he was very concerned. Otherwise, he wouldn't have specifically asked about Mr. Gang. Knowing that the reason he was so concerned about Paradise Tower was mostly because of Alusha, coupled with his conversation with Alusha yesterday, Noah finally decided to take the initiative to investigate Paradise Tower. Of course, investigating Paradise Tower was one thing. More importantly, Noah wanted to see that so-called Jalal. To be able to attract so much attention from Mr. Gang, and look exactly like Mr. Gang and Zeke, and to be able to make Alusha show such a painful expression, Noah felt that this Jalal must be the key to everything. Therefore, even if it was for Alusha, Noah had to investigate this so-called Paradise Tower. Using his memory, Noah identified the map in his hand and kept flying forward. After an unknown amount of time, he suddenly stopped and floated in midair. It's this area. After confirming the location recorded on the map in his hand, Noah raised his head and looked around. After a second, he fixed his gaze on one of the locations. There was an island there. Rather than an island, it was more like a tower. It was like a tower that grew from the bottom of the sea. It was also like a towering tree that stood on the sea for a long time. Looking at the strangely shaped tower, Noah squinted his eyes. After crushing the map in his hand, his body spun. Pang! Dense black light gushed out from the death feather form of the magician, and turned into a solid thrust. Noah's figure once again turned into a meteor and swept towards the ominous tower that seemed to be under dark clouds. Dong 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 dong. Amidst the sounds of footsteps that were enough to cause the ground to tremble, many huge black shadows ran back and forth in the corridors as if they were patrolling, lingering in every corner. Noah poked his head out from a dark corner. Looking at the huge shadows, he frowned slightly. The bodies of the huge shadows were ferocious beasts with wings like ferocious beasts. On the backs of these beasts, there were soldiers wearing standard equipment and holding long spears. They were riding on the beasts and patrolling back and forth in the corridors. The security was quite strict. Originally, Noah thought that the security of this island built on the sea would not be too strict. Who knew that even if it was built in an unknown corner of the sea, the interior of the tower would still be so heavily guarded. However, this also proved that there was definitely something shameful or extremely important in this tower. Otherwise, in such a corner of the sea that was unlikely to be found, this tower that was difficult to find with a natural barrier did not need to be so heavily guarded. Noah, who was hiding in the dark, pondered for a while and decided to take action. Here, there were also some soldiers who were not riding on the beasts to patrol. When such a soldier passed by Noah's position, Noah suddenly flew out and silently appeared behind him. Pa-dash! In a crisp sound, Noah's hand chopped cleanly on the soldier's neck. Goo-dash! The soldier only felt a pain on his back and his vision blurred. He immediately lost all consciousness. Noah directly dragged the soldier who was knocked out by him into the corner. When Noah came out of the corner again, Noah had already changed into the standard equipment of the soldier. His whole body was wrapped tightly and he was holding a long spear. In this case, even if Elisha came, as long as she didn't have Naz's keen sense of smell, it would be difficult to find out that it was Noah himself. Just as Noah was thinking about what to do next, a voice called him from behind. Hey! It's time to gather. Hurry up and come here. With that said, a soldier wearing the same standard equipment as Noah came over and rudely poked Noah with the end of the long spear in his hand. Sir Jalal is going to give a speech at the venue. Everyone has to gather there. Don't tell me you forgot? Hearing this, Noah raised his eyebrows. Jalal is going to give a speech? No, I didn't forget. Noah pretended to shake his head in panic. I just want to go there too. Then hurry up. The soldier didn't wait for Noah and directly walked forward. If you're late later, then you'll be in trouble. Even if Sir Jalal is not as cruel as those hateful magic church, he will still punish those who don't follow the rules. If you don't want to eat, then continue to dawdle here. Immediately. Noah deliberately pretended to be frightened, but his mind was extremely calm. His body followed behind the running soldier and ran forward. This was a square at the bottom of the Paradise Tower. The surroundings were all made of rough stones. Even the floor and ceiling were made of stone bricks that were falling down. In such a place, all the soldiers wearing standard equipment were gathered here. The soldiers didn't line up in any sort of formation. They just stood there casually, but all of them raised their spears high up in the air and shouted loudly. Sir Jalal! Sir Jalal! Noah blended into the crowd and imitated the people around him as he raised the spear in his hand. He raised his head and looked forward. There wasn't any luxurious platform here. However, in front of the square, there was a stone staircase that extended upward, like a snake coiling in the tower. It wasn't spectacular, but the construction was quite grand. On a protruding platform above the stone staircase, there were several figures standing there. They were completely different from the soldiers in the square, wearing casual clothes. It was a tall and sturdy man with an iron shield covering his mouth and chin. Her hair was like a cat's ears, and her appearance and behavior were reminiscent of a catgirl. Her body was like a toy with edges and corners. Even her head was a strange man made of square blocks. There was also a handsome young man with slightly dark skin who looked the most like a normal person. In the middle of these four people, there was a figure with a strong presence, but his entire body was emitting an evil aura. Noah fixed his gaze on that person, a glint flashing in his eyes. All it took was a split second for Noah to recognize the man. This was because he had the exact same appearance and build as Mr. Gang and Kieran. Other than that so-called Jal, who else could it be? Looking at the figure that was exactly the same as Mr. Gang and Kieran, Noah shook his head. If it wasn't for the evil aura on him, Noah would have suspected that he was Mr. Gang or Kieran in disguise. They were too similar. There were a total of 3 people with this appearance, so how could Noah not be suspicious? Under such circumstances, Jalal stepped forward and reached out his hand as if he intended to embrace the world. Comrades, rejoice! Jalal shouted at the soldiers in the square in an impassioned tone. Our dreams! We spent 8 years to build this Paradise Tower. Today, it's finally done. Suddenly, the entire place fell silent. Oh. The next moment, astonishing cheers resounded throughout the entire arena. Chapter 394. Oh! In the entire square, all the soldiers seemed to have gone crazy all of a sudden. Like fanatics, they raised the spears in their hands and roared wildly in cheers. Despite the cheers, Jalal's voice still reverberated clearly in the air and drilled into everyone's ears. My fellow citizens, do you still remember who the previous owner of this pagoda was? His words made everyone's cheers stop abruptly. Noah was also shocked. He focused his attention and began to pay attention to Jalal's words. That's right. I believe none of you will ever forget those cruel, inhumane demons who used us as slaves. Jalal clenched his fists and said in an impassioned voice, "Those guys were originally from the magic order that believed in black magic. In order to build this tower, they captured us from all over the world and made us work for them. We worked hard, but they didn't let us eat. They are the most unforgivable people in the world. However, we should rejoice that not only have we been liberated from those bastards, we have also obtained the ownership of this tower in our resistance." Jalal waved his hand vigorously like a fanatic trying to stir up the hearts of the people. 8 years have passed. Finally, we have built this paradise tower. It will lead us to the paradise tower in front of us, allowing us to obtain true freedom. Let's show those bastards who took away our freedom what we have accomplished. Jalal shouted. Comrades, let us use this tower together. Use this magic called our system. Resurrect the great man who can lead us to the paradise of light and freedom. Jerf. Oh! The cheers were even more shocking than before. It was so loud that it caused the air to tremble. It turned into sound waves that spread in all directions. In the crowd, Noah's expression changed as his heart trembled. Although Jalal's words seemed to be fanning the zeal of the soldiers present, Noah also obtained a few pieces of information from it. Firstly, the ruler of this paradise tower was not Jalal, but a magic order that believed in black magic. However, it was overthrown by the people here, and now Jalal was ruling this tower. Secondly, the true face of this paradise tower was a forbidden magic called our system. Noah had read about this in a book before. It was said that our system was a magic that could use the living as a sacrifice to resurrect the dead. In this world, magic that could distort life as it wished was the most forbidden existence. Therefore, those who studied our system were all illegal magic order that believed in black magic. They were the real evildoers. Because this kind of magic was too forbidden, as soon as it was discovered, the council would definitely send troops to eradicate it. Therefore, as far as Noah knew, all our system should have been suppressed by the council as early as 7 years ago and disappeared in the long river of history. But now, this dangerous forbidden magic taboo appeared once again. Moreover, it was this paradise tower that had a close relationship with Elisha. Of course, this was not enough to surprise Noah. What really surprised Noah was no doubt the name that Jalal had just mentioned. The most violent, evil, and powerful black magician in the history of the magic world, who only existed in legends. The ancestor of the black magicians who raised black magic to the extreme, created countless black magic and demons, plunged the world into chaos, and had the almost invincible power to destroy the world, the legendary villain. Jalal was actually planning to use our system to resurrect the most evil black magician in history? If this news were to spread, it would probably cause a panic in the entire magic world, and make the Magic Council and all the black magicians on the continent scared out of their wits. How could Elisha have anything to do with such a dangerous thing? Thinking of this, Noah remembered what Jalal had just said. The previous rulers of this paradise tower were a group of magic orders who believed in black magic. They captured people from all over the world and made them work as coolies to build our system. Could it be that before Elusa joined Fairy Tale, she was captured by the magic order and brought here as a slave to do manual labor like the rest of the people here? In this case, it would explain why Elisha's past was related to the paradise tower, and why she knew Jalal and had an unbearable past. But, in this case, how did Elisha leave here and join Fairy Tale? Noah felt that he had touched on a corner of the truth. From now on, the Paradise Tower will enter a state of full alert. After completing the instigation, Jalal began to give orders. We are about to succeed, and we are about to gain real freedom and become the residents of paradise. We must not make any mistakes at this most critical moment. So, my compatriots, pick up the weapons in your hands, defend our ideals, and protect this tower. Lord Jalal, Lord Jalal, Lord Jalal, Lord Jalal. The soldiers shouted the name of the ruler of the Paradise Tower in an orderly manner as if they were on a pilgrimage. The fanaticism in their hearts had already been aroused by Jalal's few words. Even if the people here were to die now, there would be many people who would be willing to rush forward. Unfortunately, no one noticed that an outsider had already mixed in with them. Noah looked at Jalal, who walked up the stone stairs with 4 bodyguards and disappeared from the square. He quietly retreated, hid his figure, and soon disappeared into the crowd. It's finally done. In the dim passage, the dark-skinned boy said excitedly. Our ideals are finally about to be completed, and real freedom is about to fall into our hands. Don't be happy too early, Zio, the burly man said in a deep voice. Right now, the R system has not been successfully launched, and we still need to prepare a lot of things. Let's wait until it's done before we celebrate. Well, what's wrong with that? The vitality is the strongest. The cat-like girl said cheerfully. Simon, you're too serious. You should be more energetic. No. Only Miliana can be so energetic at this time. The square-faced man struck an exaggerated pose as if he was acting. You should be more nervous at this time. That's right. Just like when the main character in a movie is about to duel with the boss, what we need is not energy, but handsomeness, girl. We don't need that kind of thing, the boy named Zio said anxiously to the square-faced man. Wooly, is Jalal really ready to launch the R system? The construction of the Paradise Tower has been completed, and it can be activated at any time. All that's left is the sacrifice. The one who answered Zio was not the square-faced man named Wooly, but the burly Simon. Originally, to revive a great person like Jerf, we need a lot of live sacrifices, but Jalal said that he doesn't want to do such cruel things like the magic church, so we just need to prepare a special sacrifice. A special sacrifice? Miliana tilted her head. What is it? Is it a cat? A cat won't do. Hi, girl. No matter how I think about it, it can't be a cat, right? Wooly tapped his forehead with his finger and lowered his head, making a handsome pose. I heard that it requires someone with magic power and a body comparable to the 10 great Saint Magisters as a sacrifice. That's right. Jill already has a candidate in mind. Simon's voice became even deeper. This person is Alusha. When this name came out of Simon's mouth, the 4 people present all stopped in their tracks, and the atmosphere around them changed completely. Alusha. Zio's face was gloomy as she let out a creepy laugh. What a nostalgic name. Unfortunately, it's also easy to awaken the hatred in my heart. What should we do? Miliana asked timidly. Are we going to find little Elu? Just as she said that, a voice sounded from the tunnel where Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miliana were. About this matter, please explain it to me properly. Chapter 395. About this matter, please explain it to me clearly. Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miliana, who were still immersed in the heavy atmosphere of memories, were suddenly shocked. Their bodies tensed up almost reflexively, and they got into a fighting stance. A few poker cards appeared in Zio's hand. Simon clenched his fist like a judo master and lowered his body. One of Wooly's hands changed shape like a toy and turned into a gun muzzle. Miliana, on the other hand, was like a cat. Her hands formed into claws, and she bared her teeth. Who? Under the vigilant gazes of the 4 people, Noah, who was still wearing the standard equipment of the soldiers of the Paradise Tower, took off the mask on his face and revealed his appearance from the shadows of the tunnel in front of them. He walked out step by step. His dark and deep eyes were rippling with a cold light that was hard to detect as he looked ahead. It doesn't matter who I am. What matters is whether what you said just now is true. What we said just now. Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miliana were slightly stunned. If I didn't hear wrongly, you said that Jalal asked you to prepare the sacrifice to activate the R system, right? Noah suddenly smiled, but there was no smile in his eyes. And this sacrifice is Elisha. Am I right? You, Simon said solemnly. Do you know Elisha? This name seemed to have an extraordinary meaning to Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miliana. At the mention of this name, not to mention Simon, even Zio, Wooly, and Miliana's expressions turned gloomy. This surprised Noah more or less. Originally, Noah thought that the only person in this paradise tower who was related to Elisha was Jalal. Now, it seemed that the 4 people in front of him had an unusual relationship with Elisha. However, from the moment they casually said that Elisha was a sacrifice, Noah didn't think that they were Elisha's companions. Even if he was in the past, he definitely didn't have that right now. It seems that Jalal is serious. Noah laughed, but even the 4 people present could hear the coldness in his laughter, and they couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts. Very well. Anyway, the investigation of the Paradise Tower is almost complete. There's no need to be secretive. Since you intend to target Elisha, I don't need to show any mercy. As soon as he finished speaking, a wave of manna gushed out from Noah's shoulder. It was as if it had turned into a vortex that hovered and gathered, forming an intricate geometric pattern. Buzz! Every precise geometric design resembled the muzzle of a laser cannon, and a large amount of manna gathered inside each magic array, causing each magic array to flash with a dazzling light. No! Simon, who had the keenest senses, widened his eyes and roared. Be careful! He only had time to say these words before the intricate geometric magic arrays suspended above Noah trembled, and a dazzling light burst out. Then, like a tide, magic cannons burst out from the intricate geometric magic arrays and flooded the entire passage. Boom! When that astonishing loud noise resounded from the Paradise Tower, on the surface of the sea, the corner of the Paradise Tower that stood there like a towering tree seemed to have undergone a shocking explosion. A burst of light burst out, stirring up a burst of thick smoke that rose into the sky. In a dim room on the top floor of the Paradise Tower, Jalal, who was sitting on a throne-like seat, frowned slightly and listened attentively to the loud sound that resounded throughout the entire Paradise Tower. Hearing the loud sound, Jalal raised his brows and turned his head to look at a shelf next to the armrest of his seat. There was a crystal ball placed there. To be precise, it was a magic crystal. Reaching out his hand, Jalal gently stroked the surface of the crystal ball. A surge of manna flowed into the crystal ball, causing it to flash with a solitary light. A moment later, an image was projected on the crystal ball. It was the image of Noah standing in a passage filled with thick smoke and flames with intricate geometric magic arrays suspended above his head. Seeing this scene, especially when he saw Noah's appearance, Jalal's eyes glowed, and he smiled. Why is he here? Jalal actually knew Noah. Interesting. It just so happens that the Paradise Tower is completed. To celebrate Gerald's rebirth, let's play a little game. After saying this, Jalal turned his gaze to the front and revealed a sinister smile. I wanted to hire an assassin guild to work for me, but I didn't expect to be infiltrated before I even started. I hope Simon and the others can play with him for a while. Huff! Thick smoke and flames mixed with strong shockwaves permeated the entire passageway, filling every corner in an instant. With the intricate geometric magic arrays suspended above his head, the area within 2 meters around Noah seemed to have fallen into a vacuum zone. The smoke and flames in the surroundings seemed to be deliberately avoiding Noah's position and automatically parted to the sides. The person who caused all this to happen narrowed his eyes and looked at the center of the smoke and flames in front of him. He said half jokingly, half seriously, "This is really surprising. I thought that this attack would at least have some effect. I didn't expect that it actually didn't hurt you at all. What a strange magic." After saying that, Noah waved his hand, and a gust of wind formed out of thin air and blew away the smoke and flames in front of Noah, exposing the scene inside to the air. In the middle of a huge pit, there were a few poker cards that reflected the lonely light like mirrors lying there quietly. Upon a closer look, Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miljana seemed to have entered the poker cards. Their figures became smaller than the poker cards and were reflected on the mirror-like surface. Gotcha! However, in the next second, a cracking sound was heard, and the surface of the cards with the 4 of them on them cracked open. Boom! The next moment, the poker cards exploded like glass. Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miljana appeared in the pit out of thin air. They were either kneeling on one knee or lying on the ground, looking at Noah in horror. Zio, in particular, seemed to have expended a lot of energy. She collapsed on the ground, panting rapidly with a face full of exhaustion. Just now, it was Zio who had used magic to seal Simon, Wooly, Miljana, and herself in the poker cards, allowing them to escape Noah's attack. Zio! Miljana hurriedly supported Zio with a worried expression. Simon and Wooly went forward at the same time and stood in front of Zio and Miljana to protect them. They looked at Noah angrily. Who exactly are you? Do you want to know? Noah glanced at Simon and Wooly. All you need to know is that I'm Elisha's companion. Elisha's companion? Wooly was stunned. Elisha's companion? Simon was also taken aback, but a thoughtful glint flashed in his eyes. Little Elu's companion? Miljana cried out in surprise. Why would little Elu's companion appear here? Companion? Zio's face was a little pale as she broke out in a cold sweat. However, she cast her gaze at Noah and said in a mocking tone, "That sister who betrayed us actually has a new companion. It's really as Jalal said. She has long forgotten about us." Noah, who didn't want to say too much to Simon and company, couldn't ignore this sentence. His sharp eyes focused directly on Zio. What do you mean by that? Tell me clearly. Isn't it clear enough? Zio didn't look timid at all under Noah's sharp gaze. Instead, she shouted even more agitatedly. Then I'll tell you. Elisha Shukalito is a traitor. A traitor who once betrayed us. A traitor who betrayed her companions. Elisha betrayed her companions? Noah stared at Zio's agitated face. When he realized that she didn't seem to be lying, he frowned deeply. Elisha betrayed her companions? Is this possible? Chapter 396. No one knew Elisha better than Noah. This wasn't an exaggeration, but the truth. Although Noah had left Fairy Tale for quite some time, Elisha was the first friend of the same age that Noah had met in Fairy Tale apart from Gray. They were also childhood sweethearts who had grown up together. And to Elisha, Noah was the first person she had truly opened her heart to after joining Fairy Tale. She had once said that it was Noah who had saved her, so it was obvious how close the two of them were. The Elisha that Noah knew was the kind of person who looked strong on the outside but was equally strong on the inside. Although she had weaknesses, she definitely wouldn't run away from this weakness. She treated her companions better than herself and treated the people around her more important than herself. She was a truly selfless and heroic Valkyrie. How could Noah not understand such a person who had grown up with him, worked with him, played with him, and even bathed with him? To say that Elisha was a traitor who would betray her companions? Let alone Noah, even the members of Fairy Tale who didn't often interact with Elisha wouldn't believe it. However, Zio's excited expression didn't look like she was lying. Furthermore, Simon, Wooly, and Miriana had lowered their heads in silence. The atmosphere made Noah unable to tell that they were acting at all. With the contradiction between the two, Noah couldn't ignore Zio's words. What's going on? Noah's voice more or less turned cold. Speak clearly. We have nothing to say to you. Zio seemed to have recovered some of her strength. She stood up and held a few poker cards in her hand as she smiled sinisterly. After we lock you in the dungeon and capture Sister, we will give you plenty of time to reunite. When the time comes, you can ask her properly. Hi, Simon. Almost at the same moment Zio finished her sentence, Wooly shouted, Aren't you going to put on a magnificent show? The burly man named Simon suddenly took a step forward, and a considerable amount of magic power gushed out from his body. A magic formation spun and spread out from under his feet, instantly covering the entire ground. Darkness instant dash. It was as if something had suddenly spread to the surroundings, and Noah's field of vision was suddenly lost. The thing that spread out was darkness. Just as the word said, all the light in the entire space disappeared without a trace in a moment, causing the surroundings to become extremely dark. Not to mention seeing far away, one couldn't even see one's own hands. It was truly a case of not being able to see 5 fingers if one stretched out one's hand. Because Noah was strengthened by the protozoan virus, his night vision was better than that of an owl under the enhancement of various species' DNA. However, when the darkness spread, Noah still lost all of his vision and couldn't see anything. The reason was simple. The darkness wasn't night in the true sense, but a region without light created by magic. Noah's current situation was as if he had sunk into a swamp. No matter how good his night vision was, he couldn't see the swamp that was filled with mud. Faced with this situation, Noah was surprisingly calm. That is to say, if I don't subdue you, you won't say anything, right? Are you sure you're not mistaken? Zio's voice sounded from all directions and entered Noah's ears. The one who should be subdued should be you. With that, a sharp sound of something breaking through the air sounded from behind Noah. In the darkness that Noah couldn't see, Wooly's body, who was in an exaggerated posture, disintegrated into square blocks that resembled building blocks. Like cannonballs, they went against the strong wind and broke through the air, enveloping Noah like a curtain of rain. Bang! Unfortunately, before the cannonball-like blocks could land on Noah's body, a burst of violent magic turned into a storm. With Noah as the center, it suddenly surged and attacked in all directions. It was as if they had crashed into a solid wall. When the rain-like cubes that were flying towards Noah collided with the storm that was formed by the magic power, all of them were sent flying backwards. At a speed faster than when they came, they landed on the head of Wooly, who was left with only his head left. Bang! The sound of the collision sounded. Good. Wooly let out a muffled groan. His head was instantly smashed by the various parts of his body that had turned into blocks. Like a smashed wall, his head fell to the ground. Wadash! The surrounding darkness didn't seem to affect Simon's companions. Seeing Wooly being defeated in one blow, Simon let out a cry of disbelief. He actually used magic to reflect magic. Can that kind of thing be done? Miliana was at a loss. Damn it! You monster! Even Zio seemed to be in disbelief as she roared at Noah. She grabbed the poker cards in her hand and threw them out. Ding 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 ding. Amidst the crisp sounds, all the poker cards that Zio had thrown out turned into rays of light. They flashed through the air and shot out explosively. But this time, Noah did not choose to waste a large amount of mana to reflect the spells that were targeted at him. Instead, he stomped on the ground forcefully, causing the ground to crack. At the same time, his body spun like a top and bounced off in another direction. Ding 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 ding. The poker cards that had turned into rays of light fell to the ground. The sharp corners of the cards pierced into the ground before dissipating and returning to their original appearance. At this moment, Noah, who had spun like a top, flew past like a ghost and charged in Zio's direction. Wooly! Miana! Realizing that she couldn't react to Noah's speed at all, Zio shouted anxiously. Cat binding! Miliana, who had reacted, hurriedly raised her hand towards Noah. During the spurt of magic, a flexible tube-like rope spiraled up like a whip like a tornado, rubbing against the air and shooting in Noah's direction. Polygon attack. Wooly, who had poked his head out of the fragments of his body, didn't put on airs anymore. He activated all the magic in his body, causing the cubes to float up again and fly out like bullets, shooting out rapidly. Simon, who had been maintaining the magic called Dark Moment, was even more straightforward. He charged directly in Zio's direction, or more accurately, in Noah's direction. He raised his fist and swung it at Noah. With a gust of wind, he smashed it fiercely at Noah. Come on! Even Zio seemed to be in a frenzy. She held a poker card between her fingers and charged forward instead of retreating. Suddenly, Noah had Zio charging at him from the front. Behind him was Miliana's whip-like attack. On his left was Simon, who was charging at him like an iron tower. On his right was blocks that resembled cannonballs. There were attacks from the front, back, left, and right. Facing this situation, Noah smiled coldly. He stretched out his finger, and his magic followed the trajectory of his finger and wrote a rune in the air. That was the magic spell that had defeated all of the Phantom Lord's magic shooters in a single strike. Boom! With Noah as the center, a magnificent shock wave stirred up like an explosion. It spread in all directions, stirring up smoke and dust. Pa. At this moment, regardless of whether it was the poker cards, ropes, cubes, or fists, they were all blown away by the violent shock wave. Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miliana only had time to cry out in alarm before they were all drowned by the shock wave. Boom! A corner of the Paradise Tower that stood on the sea once again exploded, causing the thick smoke that had begun to dissipate to rise and fill the sky once again. The soldiers in the Paradise Tower were finally alarmed. They rushed over amidst the commotion. The commotion was still ongoing. Chapter 397. Gravel continued to roll back and forth from the surrounding walls and the ground, causing a series of crisp sounds to ring out. Thick smoke and dust covered the surroundings and spread towards a hole that led to the outside that had appeared at some point in time. It was exposed to the sunlight outside and rose along the Paradise Tower, blowing towards the sky. Noah, who was standing in the tunnel that was in a sorry state as if it had been attacked by an explosion, patted the clothes that stuck to his body and flicked the dust away. Then he looked around. Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miliana were lying on the ground in front, behind, left, and right of Noah. Their bodies were dirty, and they were moaning in pain as they struggled to move their bodies. From the outside, the four of them didn't seem to have suffered any obvious external injuries. It was mainly because their bodies had suffered an impact. Now, their bodies were in a state similar to numbness and pain, making it difficult for them to stand up. Seeing this, Noah frowned. Did I hit them too hard? How can I ask questions like this? Just as he said this, there was a commotion on the other side of the tunnel. Over there. The explosion just now came from there. Quick, let's go and take a look. Let's go and take a look. Along with this voice, a series of messy footsteps came without any rhythm, causing Noah's frown to deepen. Looking at Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miliana lying on the ground and still struggling to move their bodies, Noah pondered for a while and sighed. Forget it, let's wait until we get to the bottom of this before taking action. With that said, Noah was just about to walk towards Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miliana when his footsteps suddenly stopped. He frowned again, raised his head, and looked up. Noah stared at the ceiling that was only made of stone. All of a sudden, he smiled. I see. Have I been discovered? After saying this, Noah retracted his gaze as if nothing had happened. Therefore, when all the soldiers gathered here arrived at the scene, it wasn't just Noah. Even Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miliana had disappeared, leaving the soldiers with a disheveled and messy scene. On the top floor of the Paradise Tower, Jalal, who was sitting in a throne-like position, looked at the crystal ball on his armrest and met Noah's eyes, who suddenly raised his head and looked at him in the crystal ball. Looking at Noah, who smiled on the crystal ball and retracted his gaze before taking Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miliana away, Jalal reached out his hand and touched the crystal ball. The image on it instantly disappeared. Sure enough, a guy who can control a gold-tier beast like that can't be a simple person. To be able to defeat Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miliana so easily, plus that gold-tier beast, it seems like I'm in some danger. Jalal showed a rare troubled expression as he hesitated. Do I have to call him back? This idea was rejected by Jalal as soon as it came to his mind. There are more important plans over there. I can't give up because of an accident. Let's see how things go. This was an empty room in the Paradise Tower. The room seemed to belong to ordinary soldiers. Not only were there no decorations, but there were also many beds arranged in a row. Obviously, this room didn't belong to anyone. Instead, it was like a dormitory, a large room where a large number of soldiers lived. Bang! In such a room, Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miliana were tied up with thick ropes from who knew where, and were violently thrown to the ground with their butts touching the ground. It hurts. Miliana felt that her buttocks didn't belong to her anymore. Tears welled up in her eyes. Damn it. Zio also felt the pain, but like a rebellious teenager, she struggled regardless of the situation. Let me go. No. Even Wu Li cried out in alarm. His voice actually carried a hint of despair. This isn't gorgeous at all. It's not cool at all. Simon was the only one who sat there obediently. He just kept looking at Noah, his eyes flashing. After the battle just now, although the four of them didn't suffer any obvious injuries, they had basically used up all of their magic power and were in a state where they couldn't use magic. And magic power was equivalent to life force. In a situation where their magic power was depleted to the point where they couldn't even use magic, Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miliana felt weak all over. Except for Zio, no one wanted to waste their strength and struggle. Therefore, instead of doing something useless, it was better to buy time to recover their magic power. In that case, an ordinary rope wouldn't be able to trap them. Simon understood this, Miliana understood this, and even Wooly, who had been making a ruckus, understood this, so they didn't do anything. Only Zio seemed to be unable to accept the fact that she had lost, or rather, she was really unwilling to accept it and kept struggling. Looking at the four of them, Noah looked down at them in a condescending manner, his voice without the slightest bit of emotion. Speak. Why did you say that Alusha betrayed you? Zio glared fiercely at Noah, and even Miliana pouted angrily, ignoring Noah's question. Don't you know that negotiations are usually about mutual compromise? Wooly responded to Noah, but he was like the male lead of a movie who was deliberately acting cool, revealing a smile that he thought was very handsome. Let us go first, then we can consider answering you. How about it? Is that so? Noah smiled, and his smile made the four captives feel a chill in their hearts. In other words, if I don't torture you, you won't answer my questions obediently, right? Torture? Zio, Wooly, and Miliana were shocked, and their faces were filled with fear. As slaves in the Tower of Paradise, which was still under the rule of the magic order that believed in black magic, Miliana and the others must have been tortured a lot back then. Now, after 8 years, they encountered such a situation again. It must have made them recall what happened back then, which was why they were afraid, right? Simon, who was the only one who remained silent, sighed and looked up at Noah. Alusha was once a slave in this tower, just like us. Hearing that, Noah's face sank. Indeed, Alusha was once a slave here? Simon! Zio yelled. That's enough, Zio, Simon said to Zio expressionlessly. There's nothing to hide, is there? Zio immediately gritted her teeth, snorted, and turned her head away. Now, those who are still in this tower are slaves who were captured by the magic order from other places 8 years ago, Simon said in a deep voice. It's the same for Alusha. She was captured by the magic order, and we met at that time. With Simon's recount, Noah finally learned of Alusha's unbearable past. Alusha, Zio, Simon, Wooly, Miliana, and the others were captured by the magic order that believed in black magic. They were slaves who attempted to build the R system through labor. It was the same for Jalal. Under the situation of not having enough to eat or sleep, and being abused from time to time, Alusha and the others had been living in this hellish place. They were used as tools and did manual labor every day. One could imagine how cruel this was to a child. However, wherever there was suppression, there would be resistance. By chance, Zio, who was still a child at the time, proposed an escape plan, but she was discovered. Zio, who was interrogated by the magic order, didn't have the courage to stand forward and admit that she was the one who proposed the plan. In the end, Alusha was captured and tortured as a scapegoat. It was at that time that Alusha lost an eye. And with that as an opportunity, the slaves in the Tower of Paradise rebelled and began to riot. Originally, the riot would have been a success because Alusha had awakened magic during this process and defeated all the magic soldiers. But at that moment, an accident happened. Zio, Simon, Wooly, Miliana, and the others, who were waiting to escape on the ship, were informed of something by Jalal, who suddenly appeared in front of them. Elisha was immersed in the power of magic and betrayed them. Chapter 398. Elisha was immersed in the power of magic. She betrayed us? Noah raised his eyebrows and looked at Simon. Is this what Jalal said? Simon nodded and lowered his head, as if he didn't want Noah to see his expression. Jalal said that Elisha was unable to learn the correct form of magic due to her awakening of magic during her resistance. As a result, she was devoured by the power of magic and lost herself. She went to the end of the road and abandoned everyone. Hearing Simon's words, Noah had a thoughtful look in his eyes. That Elisha was immersed in the power of magic? Fortunately, only Noah heard this sentence. Otherwise, he would definitely be laughed at by everyone who knew Elisha. As the famous fairy queen of the Fiori kingdom, if Elisha was really immersed in the power of magic and lost herself, then it would be impossible to win back this title. Noah had been training with Elisha since he was young. He saw with his own eyes that Elisha practiced her outfit-changing magic 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times a day. Moreover, every time she felt that it was not enough, she would have a determined expression and continue to work hard. Was this what a person who was immersed in the power of magic and lost herself would do? People who were immersed in the power of magic and lost their sense of self would definitely not think of working hard to train. Instead, they would be like those magic orders who believed in black magic. Every day, they would frantically search for forbidden magic like the R system, and try to find a shortcut to increase their power. Therefore, when Simon said such a sentence, Noah was sure that it was false. It was not that what Simon said was false, but that the truth was not what Simon knew. At least, Noah felt that it was definitely not like that. Sister installed bombs on all the boats and blew up all the boats that we used to escape. She escaped by herself. Zio finally said with hatred. If it weren't for Jul, we would have been blown up by the sister who abandoned us all. Wooly and Miljana also lowered their heads and fell silent in grief. Sigh. Looking at his companions, Simon sighed and turned his head away as if he couldn't bear to look at them. You said that Jalal suddenly appeared in front of you when you were planning to escape, right? Noah's deep eyes stared straight at Simon. So what was Gerard doing before that? Jalal is being held captive, Simon answered honestly. Because Zio's escape plan was exposed, Elisha was locked up in the torture chamber to be punished. In order to save Elisha, Jalal escaped alone. With that said, Simon shot a glance at Zio and saw her biting her lips tightly as she tried her best to hold back her feelings of guilt. He sighed again. We waited in the cell obediently, but in the end, what we waited for was Elisha who lost an eye. And Jalal was discovered to have gone to save Elisha and was locked up in the torture chamber to be punished in place of Elisha. Simon raised his head, his eyes shining brightly. It was at that time that Elisha decided to resist and saved all of us to fight the magic order. Little Elu at that time was really handsome. Miljana seemed to recall the scene at that time. She smiled in a daze, but her expression soon dimmed again. But even little Eru was only a child at that time. She almost died. The person who saved Elisha at that time was a grandfather named Rob. Simon shook his head. Grandpa Rob used to be a very great magic shooter, but for some reason he lost his power. In order to save Elisha, he used up all his magic power. And magic power is equivalent to life force. Wooly lowered his head and said, Grandpa Rob, who used up all his magic power, died just like that. Luo boo. Noah muttered to himself. After a while he blushed. Could it be the Rob that Grandpa knew? When Makarov was young, he had a group of close friends who had gone through life and death together. Among them, there was Polyusia, whom Noah had met when he was young, Yajma, whom he had met at the Senate not long ago, and several other leaders of famous guilds in the Fiori kingdom. Noah remembered that Makarov had also mentioned a person. It was a member of Fairy Tale, who suddenly disappeared many years ago. He was also a good friend of Makarov, Polyusia, and Yajma. That person was called Rob. Could it be that the missing Grandpa Rob was the same Grandpa Rob who was caught as a slave in the Tower of Paradise and saved Elisha's life, but lost his own life? It was because she knew that Rob was a magic shooter in Fairy Tale that Elisha joined Fairy Tale after escaping from the Tower of Paradise. You guys continue. Noah, who had sorted out everything, stared straight at Simon. And then? What happened? Later, because of Grandpa Rob's death, Elisha awakened her magic and defeated all the people from the Church of Magic. She ran off to save Jalal alone, and before that, we escaped back to the ship. Simon met Noah's gaze and his tone became steady. During the period when Elisha went to save Jalal, we didn't know what happened. But later, Jalal suddenly appeared and told us that Elisha had installed bombs on all the ships. She abandoned all of us and escaped alone. That's how Sister was saved, by abandoning all of us. Zio gave Noah an ugly smile. You said that Sister was your companion, right? You have to be careful not to be betrayed by that traitor. Just as he said that, the sole of a shoe suddenly enlarged under Zio's gaze. Bam! Noah kicked Zio's face fiercely. Zio cried out in pain as her entire head was filled with grief. Tears, snot, and even blood flowed down from her nose. Zio! Mariana exclaimed. What are you doing? Wooly also roared angrily at Noah. Noah retracted his foot and stood up. He stared coldly at Zio and spat out this sentence. You don't have the right to call Elisha sister. What did you say? Zio was enraged, and even her expression turned ferocious. What right do you have to say that? Because you are a heartless person. Noah didn't even seem willing to look at Zio as he turned his back. Because you suggested an escape plan, but you didn't have the guts to stand forward and admit it after being discovered. Elisha took the blame for you without a word. She lost her eye completely because of you. And after deciding to resist, Elisha also acted as the vanguard. If not for Elisha awakening her magic, you wouldn't have been able to escape, much less overthrow the magical order and escape your status as a slave. What did you do to such a person, to a person you call sister? Noah turned his head and scoffed in disdain. What you did was listen to the words of others and believe them without any hesitation. You let down Elisha, who saved your life, took the blame for you, and changed your fate. You don't have the right to call Elisha sister. A person like you doesn't have the right to be Elisha's younger brother. Noah glared coldly at Zio. It wasn't Elisha who betrayed you, but you who betrayed Elisha. You're lying. Lying. Zio's face turned red as she screamed crazily. Do you mean that sister didn't betray us? Were we all deceived by Jalal? At the very least, I believe in Elisha. I believe that she's definitely not the kind of person who would betray her companions. Noah's gaze turned ruthless as he looked at Zio. And you, since you can't believe in Elisha, then you don't have the right to yell here. You're just a pitiful person who failed to live up to the kindness of others. Zio's expression changed again and again. Even Wooly and Mariana couldn't help but waver. She didn't believe in Elisha, but weren't they the same? At this moment, Noah lifted his head and looked above with a cold glint in his eyes. Let me meet this Jalal and dig out the missing part of the secret. Upon hearing Noah's words, Simon's eyes flickered again. Chapter 399. Elisha had said that 3 people had saved her in this life. Now, Noah finally knew who the 3 people were. One was Luobu, a former member of Fairy Tale who had sacrificed himself to protect Elisha from the Church of Magic. The other was Jalal, who had been a slave of the Paradise Tower 8 years ago just like Elisha. He had rescued Elisha from the torture chamber but had been punished in place of Elisha. Now, he had become the ruler of the Paradise Tower. The last was Noah, the Noah who had given Elisha a new life. To Elisha, Luobu and Noah were people who had given her a rebirth in a certain sense. And since Jalal could become a scapegoat in order to save Elisha, it was obvious that he was also one of Elisha's companions. At least he used to be. However, in the middle, something must have happened when Elisha went to save Jalal after the end of the resistance, which ultimately led to an unexpected ending. In any case, Noah would never believe that Elisha was the kind of person who would betray her companions. Therefore, no matter how he thought about it, the problem lay with Jalal. As long as he found Jalal, then all the problems would be solved. Noah might also be able to find a way to let Elisha get rid of her unbearable past. Last question. Noah turned around and asked Simon, "Where is Jalal?" Upon hearing Noah's words, be it Zio, Simon, Wooly, or Miriana, they were all shocked. "Boy, don't tell me you're thinking of looking for Jalal?" Wooly shouted exaggeratedly. "I advise you to give up. That way, you can still maintain your beauty, boy. Jalal is different from us. We can only master our magic with Jalal's help," Miriana said softly. "The strongest in the Paradise Tower is Jalal, and he is very, very strong. You are definitely not his match. Although you may not be convinced by this, have you really thought it through?" Simon looked straight at Noah and said in a solemn tone, "Jalal is indeed very strong, which is why he was able to become the ruler of the Paradise Tower. You have to think carefully. If you lose, not only will you not get anything, but you will also have to pay a heavy price. If you have a death wish, feel free to do so," Zio said in a nasty tone. "In any case, you will soon taste true despair." "Oh!" Noah raised his eyebrows and looked at these people with a faint smile. "Are you worried about me? Aren't you with Jalal?" Hearing Noah's words, Miliana's group suddenly woke up. They exchanged glances with each other and became silent. Seeing this, Noah nodded in his heart. These people were not bad in nature, but they were a little too naive and easy to be used by others. Previously, they had always listened to Jalal, so everything they did was very orderly. Now, because of Noah's words, the four of them had begun to doubt Jalal's words. Their stance suddenly became unclear, so they subconsciously advised Noah, "You don't have to worry about my matters." Noah squatted down and directly untied the ropes on Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miriana. "Meow." Miriana took the lead and made a puzzled sound. "What are you doing?" Zio was also stunned. "You are not going to let us go, are you? Seeing that you are Elisha's companions who went through thick and thin with her when she was young, and that you might be used, I won't make things difficult for you." Noah threw away the rope in his hand and pointed a finger at the space in front of him. "But don't think that I will let you go so easily." After saying that, Noah's finger suddenly slid, and magic power flowed along his finger to write faintly discernible runes in the void. Then he flicked the runes slightly. Before Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miriana could even react, Noah had written 4 runes. With a flick of his finger, the runes suddenly flew out and imprinted on the chests of the 4 people, then disappeared. Only then did Miriana and the other 3 react. They hurriedly touched their chests but didn't feel anything. "What is this?" "This is just a precaution." Noah curled his lips and smiled. "If you obediently find a place to hide, or directly leave this place, then nothing will happen to you. But if you still want to continue to make things difficult for me, or even have designs on Elisha, then your bodies will be burned to a crisp in an instant." Hearing this, Miriana and the other 3 shuddered and touched their chests even more desperately, as if doing so could expel the runes hidden in their bodies. Noah didn't pay much attention to this and let them do as they pleased. "Although I don't know where it is, since it is the ruler, it shouldn't be below but above, right?" Noah looked up and the corners of his mouth slowly curled up. "I hope we can have a pleasant meeting, Jean." After saying that, Noah turned around and walked outside. Simon, who had remained silent from the beginning to the end, inadvertently saw the fairy tale guild emblem on the back of Noah's hand and fell into deep thought. After Noah left the room, the 4 present all stood up. "This script is a bit wrong," Wooly said as if he wanted to cry but had no tears. "Why does it feel like he is the protagonist? Why is he the only one who can turn around and leave so elegantly? This isn't right. That kind of thing is fine no matter what." Zio sighed and touched her chest. "What we should think about now is what we should do. What that person said should be true, right?" Miriana said timidly. "If we continue to oppose him, his magic will burn us to death. That should be the truth." Simon nodded. So, from now on, we can no longer participate in the matter between him and Jalal. Zio, Wooly, and Mariana were suddenly at a loss. Then what should we do? Just as Noah expected, the four of them who did not know who to believe at first were completely at a loss after losing a clear goal. Only Simon recalled Noah's words and took a deep breath. Let me make it clear first. I am the same as that person. From the beginning to the end, I believe that Elisha did not betray us. This sentence made Zio, Wooly, and Mariana lower their heads, not knowing what to say. However, Simon's next words shocked everyone. I want to find Elisha. Find Elisha? Everyone was shocked, and Mariana hurriedly said, But that person said we can't have any ideas about little Elu. I'm not going to capture Elisha. I'm going to ask Elisha for help. Simon said calmly. I feel that that person is not simple. He should be able to deal with Jalal, but the most frightening thing about Jalal isn't his strength, but his cunning that has deceived us for 8 whole years. I'm worried that he will suffer. So, we have to find Elisha. But, Zio gritted her teeth. Where should we find her? Hearing this, Simon recalled the guild emblem on the back of Noah's hand and said word by word. Fairy tale, Paradise Tower, top floor. This place was different from the rest of the Paradise Tower. At the very least, this place was not just made of unchanging stones. After entering the vast room on the top floor of the Paradise Tower, the first thing Noah saw was a huge crystal in the middle of the room that looked like an ice spike. Noah couldn't tell if this crystal was a magic crystal because it didn't contain any mana. Meanwhile, on the walls around the room were murals of vicious demons and humans with painful expressions. The murals made Shurfang's hair stand on end. Although you are an uninvited guest, allow me to greet you for the time being. The one who said this was the blue-haired ruler sitting on the throne, looking at Noah who was slowly walking over with an evil look in his eyes. Welcome to my Paradise Tower, Noah Dole. Looking at Jalal, who exuded a sinister aura, Noah's eyes glowed with a frightening light. Chapter 400. Separated by a huge crystal in the middle of a vast space, Noah, who was standing at the entrance, and Jalal, who was sitting on the throne, looked at each other in the air. Although there were no obvious sparks bursting out, the atmosphere around them had completely sunk and become extremely oppressive. Noah cast his gaze at Jalal, who was sitting opposite him, and slowly walked forward while speaking indifferently. You know me. This was the first real meeting between Noah and Jalal. However, Jalal was able to call out his full name, which meant that he had some information about Noah. Jalal smiled nonchalantly and stood up from his seat. He mimicked Noah and walked forward while speaking in a playful tone. Don't you know me too? Then you should know why I'm here, right? Noah's expression remained unchanged. I don't know, sir. Do you intend to answer my question? Which purpose are you referring to? Jalal stared at Noah who was walking towards him. Information about the Paradise Tower? Or the truth of the past? However, to Jalal's surprise, Noah actually sneered. You must be mistaken somewhere, right? Noah lifted his chin slightly and cast a cold gaze on Jalal. Information about the Paradise Tower? The truth of the past? That's not the most important thing. Whether it's investigating the Paradise Tower or the truth of what happened here in the past, it's just to serve my only purpose from the beginning to the end. Noah stopped walking, reached out his hand, and clenched it tightly in Jalal's direction. I only have one purpose, and that is to understand Elisha's unbearable past and pull her out of the mud. That's right. That was Noah's purpose. The reason why Noah came here, the reason why he came to Jalal, was not because our system would resurrect the evil black mage Gerald, nor was it because he wanted to save everyone here. He just wanted to liberate Elisha from her painful past. Other than that, there was no other purpose. And this purpose was extremely unexpected for Jalal. That really surprises me. Jalal smiled, and no matter how one looked at it, that smile seemed to be mocking Noah. I thought that you came to stop the activation of our system, and also thought that you came to save everyone here. I even thought that the mainland had discovered something and sent you here to investigate. I didn't expect that you came here just for Alusha alone. This really surprises me. Are you really surprised? Noah stared at Jalal's evil face as if he wanted to see through Jalal's mind. Didn't you also try to save Alusha in the torture chamber in the past? You knew that you would die if you were discovered, but you still risked everything to save Alusha, didn't you? Are you talking about that time? Jalal's smile became even wider. That's because I hadn't awakened at that time. Awakened? Noah's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean by that? At that time, I didn't realize what a great person Gerald was. Jalal's expression became a little fanatical at the mention of the name of the greatest villain in history. It wasn't until I was imprisoned in the torture chamber in place of Alusha that I realized how great Gerald was. I realized that in order to obtain true freedom and the right to live in a real paradise, I had to resurrect Gerald. That's why I awakened and started to control everything. It's a pity that Ilusa doesn't understand at all. She doesn't know how great of a person Gerald is. She even tried to persuade me to run away with my hard-earned labor force. Jalal shook his head regretfully. Although it's a pity, since Alusha couldn't understand, then I don't need her. It just so happens that I need a reason to keep everyone here, so I'll let Alusha contribute her strength to the great Gerald. Upon hearing that, Noah raised his head abruptly. His gaze was like an arrow, shooting straight at Jalal as if he wanted to pierce through him. In other words, the so-called betrayal of Alusha was all orchestrated by you? It couldn't be helped. Everything was for Gerald. Jalal unhurriedly revealed a sinister smile. Now that the Paradise Tower is finally completed, I don't need these anymore. If you want to know the truth, I'll tell you. If you want to save Alusha's companions, I'll let you save them. All I want is Gerald's resurrection. The smile on Jalal's face disappeared as he spoke, and his expression became a little terrifying and evil. Don't get in my way, Noah Doria. The entire place fell silent. Noah looked at Jalal without any change in his expression. After a while, he opened his mouth to speak. It seems like you're the one who was devoured by the power of magic. Now, the truth about Alusha's unbearable past was completely revealed. Although they didn't know what happened, Jalal, who replaced Alusha in the torture chamber, awakened his magic for some reason and was devoured by the power of magic. He didn't know if it was his magic or someone else's, and became a complete villain. Judging from Jalal's fanaticism and cruelty for Gerald, he was simply like a fanatic who had lost his sense of self and had no trace of rationality at all. That was why, in order to complete the R system, Jalal deliberately let Alusha go and blew up all the escape boats so that all the slaves could only stay behind to help him build the Paradise Tower. All the bad reputation was pushed onto Alusha. Therefore, when Alusa first joined Fairy Tale, she had that unapproachable look, and when she talked about the past, she would have such a painful expression. Jalal probably took all the people here as hostages to threaten Alusha. He didn't want Alusha to expose the matter of the Paradise Tower, or even to come close to this place. Otherwise, he would kill Alusha's former companions. Jalal, who was willing to sacrifice his own life to save Alusha, was long gone. Now, there was only an evil person who had completely lost his sense of self and was devoured by the power of magic. Thud! Noah took a step forward. His gaze on Jalal was so cold that it pierced Jalal's bones. Is it because of you that Alusha is in so much pain? What do you want to do? Noah Doria! Jalal laughed out loud. Do you want to defeat me? Do you want to stop me? Do you want to avenge Alusha? Can you do it? As soon as he finished speaking, Jalal suddenly opened his hands. Abruptly, a dazzling light suddenly rose from the vast and dark space, bringing with it a layer of phosphorescence that sprinkled on the ground, walls, and ceiling before merging into it. In the next second, in the vibration of the air, an extremely huge magic array spun and spread out, covering the entire floor in an instant. It wasn't just the floor. A mysterious magic array appeared on the surrounding walls and the ceiling above his head. Like the surface of a cube, the magic array was connected to each other, forming a strange space. Noah only felt a blur in front of his eyes. The originally spacious room disappeared and was replaced by an endless stretch of rocky land. This is... Noah couldn't help but be surprised. Are you satisfied? This is specially prepared for you. Jalal raised his hands proudly and said in a loud voice. This is a kind of ancient magic. It's a large-scale magic used to open up a battlefield to your advantage. Originally, this kind of large-scale magic was used in war, but now it's being used for you. You should feel proud, Noah Doria. A battlefield to my advantage? Noah noticed the key words. Entering this battlefield means that you have to follow the predetermined trap. Jalal's voice gradually became more and more excited. And the rule of this battlefield is that only 2 people can exist. Now Noah understood. Jalal laughed out loud. That's right. Your golden wolf can't howl. Chapter 401. Golden Wolf? Jalal knows about the existence of Golden Wolf Bio? This guy had clearly been staying in the Paradise Tower all this time, building the R system. Under such circumstances, he was still paying attention to the outside world, including his own information? Noah frowned slightly and tried to sense the situation in his mind. Noah was still able to communicate with the Golden Wolf, Bio, through his mind. However, just like what Jalal said, Noah couldn't call out Golden Wolf Bio at all. It was as if Golden Wolf Bio was locked in his body and couldn't come out at all. This was a battlefield that could only exist in 2 people. What else can you do without that Golden Wolf? Jalal smiled coldly. My Paradise Tower is still missing a body and magic power equivalent to one of the 10 great saint magicians as a sacrifice. Your Golden Wolf is just right. I'll let you offer your strength to the great Jerf. After saying that, Jalal's eyes, which were full of tattoos, opened and closed, and the eyeballs inside disappeared completely, replaced by a hideous and terrifying pattern. It was as if a demon had attached itself to Jalal's body and turned one of his eyes into a demon's eye. In the next moment, Jalal moved. Wang! A powerful magic power that looked like a dark, filthy gas suddenly rose from Jalal's body. Let me see what you've got. Grandson of Makarov. Jalal raised his hand, and magic power that looked like black water suddenly rose from his palm and turned into a tentacle-like shadow. The tentacle-like shadow trembled slightly, and like a man-eating vine that was crawling toward its prey, the tentacle-like shadow rushed toward Noah with a sharp sound of breaking through the air. Noah glanced at the shadow that rushed toward him. His eyes narrowed little by little, and a hint of mockery flashed through his eyes. He didn't move at all. A moment later, 2 tentacle-like black shadows suddenly arrived with 2 gusts of wind. The sharp force was accompanied by an ear-piercing sound as it tore through the air. One from above and one from below, it ruthlessly lashed at Noah. Jalal's attack position was quite tricky. One on the top and one on the bottom, they happened to be in 2 difficult positions. If Noah chose to guard against only one area, then he would definitely be hit by the other. Clearly, even after sealing Bio, Jalal still did not underestimate Noah. It was a pity that Jalal had miscalculated Noah's strength. Under Jalal's gaze, Noah, who was standing still like a statue, shuddered violently when the 2 pitch-black attacks were about to hit him. Jalal could only see that Noah's body suddenly turned into an afterimage. Instead of retreating, he moved forward, and in the next moment, 2 phantoms shot out from Noah's body. Those were actually 2 fist shadows. The 2 fist shadows and the 2 tentacle-like shadows suddenly collided. Bang! In an instant, an extremely terrifying force erupted from the collision, as if it had materialized. A low muffled sound was heard, and a fierce force gushed out like a flood, shaking up a gust of wind, and then both dissipated. Jalal's pupils suddenly shrank. Then, in his pupils, an afterimage passed through the strong gust of wind, as if it was shuttling through the cracks of space, and rushed toward him. Seeing this scene, Jalal realized that he had underestimated Noah's strength. At first, Jalal thought that even if Noah could subdue the Golden Wolf Bio, it proved that he had some ability. But in the battle with Joseph, Noah did not make a move and let the Golden Wolf Bio fight instead. That must be because his strength was not as strong as the Golden Wolf Bio, and it might even be far inferior. Therefore, Jalal guessed that even if Noah's strength was very strong, it could not reach the level of the 10 saints. And with Jalal's current strength, although it had not reached the level of the 10 saints, it was not far from it. Therefore, Jalal thought that it would not be difficult to defeat Noah in a one-on-one duel. However, seeing the strength and speed of Noah's magic, Jalal knew that he had guessed wrong. At that moment, Jalal stamped his foot, and his figure rapidly retreated. At this moment, an afterimage appeared, and Noah's figure was exposed in Jalal's vision again. His whole body shook, and a burst of violent magic vibrated out, turning into a substantial impact, like a storm, spreading in all directions. Wadash! Jalal's expression finally changed, and a shocked expression appeared on his face. This magic? How is it possible? As soon as he finished his sentence, the substantial impact of the magic caught up with Jalal, who was retreating, and fiercely collided with him. Boom! The ferocious impact vented on Jalal's body, and he was forced to retreat. His feet scraped a long mark on the ground, and he let out a muffled groan. A dull pain came from his chest, and some cold sweat appeared on Jalal's forehead. Before Jalal could catch his breath, a faint sound of something breaking through the air resounded. A black shadow suddenly appeared in front of Jalal, raised its head, and fixed its cold eyes on Jalal's face. Then, a shining fist covered by a vortex of airflow entered Jalal's eyes. Hiya! A sense of crisis rose in Jalal's heart, and his face became slightly crazed. He roared and suddenly stretched out his hand, which was shrouded in black light. It was like a black beast's claw, and with a wave of magic, it struck out fiercely. Suddenly, the fist carrying the bright vortex of airflow and the black beast's claw collided with each other like cannonballs. Bang! The shockingly loud sound was accompanied by a burst of violent wind that suddenly attacked in all directions. Kacha kacha kacha. The ground made of magic cracked under the attack of the violent impact wind, and the ground at the center of the impact directly exploded, sending countless gravel flying in all directions like bullets. It's not over yet. Jalal's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets, and his hands formed a palm shape. An extremely evil magic fluctuated in the center of his palms, and as Jalal struck out his palms, it turned into two spiraling black lights that shot toward Noah like sharp spears. If an attack like a beam of light fell on a human body, it would definitely be able to penetrate the fragile human body and open two bloody holes in it. However, Jalal didn't notice it. At this moment, Noah's figure was slightly illusory. Under such circumstances, Jalal's beam of black light finally closed in and hit Noah's body heavily. However, at the moment of impact, it strangely penetrated through Noah's body and fell to the ground behind. Bang! The ground that was hit by the black light exploded, and a cloud of smoke and fire rose. When the beam of black light penetrated Noah's body, Jalal's expression changed greatly. That was because it was only an afterimage. Is that it? Just as Jalal's expression changed greatly, a somewhat cold palm was gently placed on his back without him noticing. Jalal's hair stood on end, and all the hair on his body suddenly stood up. If that's the case, then let this battlefield made of ancient magic be your grave. As soon as the voice fell, the hand that was placed on Jalal's back shook and flashed with a dazzling phosphorescent light. Bang! The magic bullet, that was shot out at zero distance, was absolutely unavoidable. It exploded directly on Jalal's back, and a cloud of blue fire burst out. Jalal didn't even have time to make a sound before the violent impact from behind vented all on his body. Jalal was suddenly sent flying as if he had been hit by a truck. Bang! Jalal landed on the ground with a dull thud. He rolled a few times on the ground in a sorry state before he finally stabilized himself. His body went limp and fell to the ground. From the moment Jalal launched his attack on Noah to the moment he fell to the ground, the whole process took less than 10 seconds. In just 10 seconds, Jalal was defeated. Chapter 402. Whoosh! In the battlefield created by ancient magic, a storm was blowing violently around Noah, bringing along waves of dust and wind. He stood on the rocky ground like the eye of a typhoon. Gulp. Jalal, who had collapsed on the ground, clutched his chest. However, the pain came from his back, which made his face turn pale. He struggled to lift his body and cast his gaze at Noah, who had turned into the eye of the typhoon with a complicated expression in his eyes. He was shocked by Noah's strength that was beyond his expectations. He was also in disbelief that he was defeated by Noah in just 10 seconds. However, there was also an indescribable ecstasy in Jalal's eyes. Jalal stared at Noah, whose entire body was erupting with vast amounts of mana as if it was a sea wave, squandering it in the most wasteful way possible and turning it into substantial waves that swirled around him like a tornado. After a long time, Jalal suddenly smiled. Ha, ha, ha. That was a crazy laugh triggered by the ecstasy in his heart. This must be fate. Fate is on my side. There's no way to stop Jervis's resurrection. Ha. Seeing Jalal laughing like a madman, Noah frowned deeply. How could Jalal laugh so happily in such a situation? If it were someone else, Noah would definitely think that the other party had been driven crazy. However, although Jalal seemed to be crazy, the ecstasy in his eyes was real, as if he had encountered something great. That burst of ecstasy even overshadowed the blow brought to Jalal by his defeat at the hands of Noah, making Jalal laugh like a madman. What? Noah sensed that there might be a reason that he didn't know, so he asked sarcastically, "Are you that happy to be defeated so cleanly?" "Happy? Of course I'm happy." Jalal laughed as he struggled to stand up. Even though he still had a painful expression on his face, he was still laughing crazily. Especially when he looked at Noah, his eyes were full of fanaticism. Because the conditions for Jervis's resurrection have finally been met. Ha! Jalal's ear-piercing laughter reverberated throughout the battlefield constructed by ancient magic for a long time. At the same time, in a conference room of the Fiori Kingdom's council branch, Zeke, who was discussing a topic with the surrounding counselors, suddenly froze, and then became ecstatic. Ha, ha, ha. Just like Jalal on the other side of the world, Zeke suddenly laughed wildly without warning. He was abnormally excited. The counselors sitting in the other seats were all stunned. Even Urudia couldn't help but stare blankly at Kaiklane with a face full of astonishment. "Zeke, what are you doing?" Oge frowned and snorted coldly at Zeke. "We're still in the middle of a meeting. You don't deserve your status as a counselor if you act so presumptuously." "Counselor?" Zeke looked around at everyone in the room with a sarcastic expression. "That status, you old farts should cherish it." Leaving behind these words, Zeke's figure slowly became illusory. Not long after, he disappeared. All the counselors stood up in shock. "What's wrong?" Ajma exclaimed. "What's going on?" Just as he finished speaking, the ground suddenly shook. Pa 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 pa. While the counselors were caught off guard, the surrounding walls, ceilings, floors, and even tables and chairs all fell into a weathered state, shattering bit by bit amidst a series of crisp sounds. "Wah!" Some of the cowardly counselors screamed and sat on the ground due to their weak legs. In the middle of these counselors, an enchanting figure stood there unaffected. It was none other than Eurulia. Although I don't know what happened, there seems to be some unexpected situation on the other side, making the plan go more smoothly. Urusha stretched out her hand and held a slowly rotating magic array as if she was holding a treasure. "In that case, I can't let you get in the way." Hearing this, some of the more sharp-minded counselors, including Ajma, immediately understood. Both Zeke and Urusha were villains who had infiltrated the council for a certain purpose. At the same time, Noah, who was still on the battlefield constructed by ancient magic in the Paradise Tower, looked at Jalal, who was still laughing maniacally. Suddenly, he raised his head as if he sensed something and looked in front of him, which was right next to Jalal. There, Chicharito, who had disappeared from the council, slowly appeared beside Jalal like a phantom. His wild laughter was almost identical to that of Jalal's. Noah's gaze suddenly froze. "It's you. I didn't think we'd meet again so soon." It was completely different from the last time they met. This time, Kieran's body was filled with the strange yet familiar evil aura that Noah felt at the same time. It was unfamiliar because Zeke didn't have such an evil aura in the past. The familiarity was due to the evil aura on Jermaine's body, which was exactly the same as that on Jalal's body. Noah's outstanding sensing ability and keen intuition allowed him to finally notice something. In the past, Noah had always felt something off about Zeke's body. Now, Noah understood the origin of this sense of dissonance. Jalal and Zeke raised their eyebrows at the same time. Did you notice? It should be said that you didn't notice until now. Your concealment skills are pretty good. Looking at Jalal and Zeke, who had the same expression, like two sides of a mirror, Noah laughed coldly. I didn't think you'd get a body of thoughts to sneak into the council. You've put in a lot of effort, Jalal. Yes. Body of thoughts. Zeke was Jalal's body of thoughts. The so-called body of thoughts referred to a three-dimensional projection or a doppelganger. In other words, Jalal and Zeke were not two different people, but one and the same. In order to not expose the identity of the body of thoughts, you've divided half of your magic into your body of thoughts, so that your body of thoughts can use magic on its own and act on its own, just like a real person, right? Noah was speechless. To think that even my sensing ability could only detect something amiss. Those fellows from the council are done for. Because it's necessary. Zeke, or more accurately, the body of thoughts of Jalal's doppelganger, grinned at Noah. Although the Tower of Paradise is being built in an orderly manner, if we want to activate the R system, we're missing the most important and essential thing. Magic. Jalal raised one of his fists, and magic fluctuated like a black gas. If we want to activate magic, we definitely need magic. It's a pity that the R system requires an enormous amount of 7 billion concepts of magic power. That's the amount of magic power that can be gathered by gathering all the sorcerers in the world. I don't know if that's enough magic power. Zeke narrowed his eyes. That's why we set our sights on the council's magic elven power. Hearing this, Noah's eyes flashed. Magic elven power. That was the council's strategic weapon. It was a combination of sorcerers with various attributes, and was equipped with various magic instruments. It could be fired from a distance using a satellite magic array, and was similar to a satellite ray, a super space-time destruction spell. It was said that once the magic elven power was activated, its power was enough to destroy a country. One could imagine how terrifying this super space-time destruction spell was. However, it was precisely because it was so powerful that the mana contained within it was definitely extraordinary. It was not strange that Jalal would set his sights on this. But now there's no need. Jalal's tone changed, and he looked at Noah with fanaticism. Because I already have a better source of magic. Chapter 403. Seeing Jalal and Zeke staring at him with eyes full of ecstasy and fanaticism, and the meaning behind their words, Noah's face gradually turned cold. So that's how it is. So you've turned your attention to me? Noah finally understood why Jalal was so ecstatic. It was because the 7 billion concepts of mana that would take a lot of effort to gather, and it was said that even the magic shooters in the world could not gather it, was now right in front of Jalal. That's right. Noah was being targeted. Because of the unrestrained squandering of magic power, Jalal discovered the vast, ocean-like magic power in Noah's body and made the judgment that Noah himself could meet the demand of the 7 billion concepts of magic power. Perhaps, in terms of power, Noah had no way to achieve the super-destructive power that could destroy a country like the magic elven power. However, in terms of the amount of mana in Noah's body alone, even if it couldn't be said to be endless, it could be said to be boundless. It was definitely comparable to the strategic weapons of the council. It was because of this that Jalal was so ecstatic. In other words, Jalal wanted to use Noah as a source of mana for the R system and use Noah as a sacrifice. To appear here when the Paradise Tower is about to be completed, I have to say, this is simply fate, Jalal and Kieran said in unison, full of confidence. You'll be the sacrifice for Gerald's resurrection and submit here. As soon as he finished speaking, Jalal's body became illusory. Like mist, he floated back into Jalal's body and became one with him. Wang. Along with the sound of the space vibrating, an oppressive magic power spread out from Jalal's body, filling every corner of his body. Even his aura rose fiercely, becoming incomparably powerful. If Jalal's strength wasn't at the level of one of the 10 great Saint Magi before, then now, his strength was definitely at the level of one of the 10 great Saint Magi. That was only natural. Kiran, who had half of Jalal's mana, originally had the title of one of the 10 great Saint Magi. Although Kiran's strength hadn't reached the level of a 10 saint, he wasn't far from it. In addition, his status as a counselor and the other requirement to become a 10 saint magus was to have a good character. This requirement allowed Kiran, who had concealed his true identity, to be recognized. It wouldn't be difficult for Kiran to become a 10 saint. Now, half of his mana returned to Jalal, who wasn't far from becoming one of the 10 great saints. It wasn't strange at all that Jalal's strength had reached the level of one of the 10 great saints. Now, Jalal was probably on par with people like Makarov, Joseph, Kildas and Laxus. He might even surpass them. Let's start the second round. Jalal clenched his fist and sneered. His whole body was covered in blazing magic power. His voice carried a sense of oppression. I'll let you see my real magic. Saying this, Jalal crouched down like a cheetah and put his hands on the ground. His eyes were fixed on Noah. A golden magic array spun out from the ground under Jalal, and a dazzling golden light covered Jalal's body. Meteor. His voice seemed to have turned into an echo as it reverberated in the surroundings. Along with a faint sound of breaking through the air, Jalal, whose body was filled with golden light, turned into a meteor in the truest sense of the word. Then he suddenly shot out violently. His speed was even faster than that of the golden wolf, Bio. Noah, who was calm and unruffled, had just turned serious when Jalal suddenly appeared in front of Noah. His whole body was covered in golden light, and his eyes flashed with evil light like a meteor. He suddenly clenched his fist, condensed his mana, and smashed it toward Noah's chest without any fancy moves. This punch wasn't tricky or ruthless. The only thing they had was the terrifying attack speed brought about by their terrifying speed. Under the influence of such a terrifying attack speed, the air around Jalal's fist was slightly disordered. It was as if an invisible vortex had formed around Jalal's fist. With an ear-piercing sound, he swung it forward. However, from beginning to end, except for Noah's obvious emotional fluctuation when he knew that Jalal had schemed against Elisha, Noah had always been calm and composed. With a calmness that was absolutely unbelievable to others, Noah judged that Jalal's strength had greatly exceeded his previous strength after Zeke's return and the use of the magic called Meteor. After he had the strength of a 10 saints, the mana in his body roared and flowed like a flood. Another vibration sound was heard, and a burst of rich white light quickly gushed out of Noah's body. Like a shock wave, it collided with Jalal's heavy fist. Bang! At the moment of collision, a loud explosion suddenly sounded. It was the sound of the bright brilliance of the magic called Meteor on Jalal's body exploding. But without the help of the super-fast speed of Meteor, Jalal's straight punch was like a paper tiger to Noah. He just raised his hand and firmly caught it with a crisp sound. Jalal, who was confident in his super-fast attack, had a stiff expression on his face as he cried out in astonishment. You crushed my magic? You actually have the same magic as Kildas? So you didn't know? Noah suddenly smiled. Then I'm really sorry. While speaking, Noah's hand that was holding Jalal's fist suddenly burst with a ball of rich white light. Knowing the true nature of Noah's magic, Jalal knew that if he did nothing, then in the next moment, it would not be his magic that would be crushed, but his arm. This made Jalal couldn't help but shiver. His somewhat arrogant attitude due to the return of all his strength disappeared without a trace. He didn't dare to be arrogant anymore. Meteor. Calling out the name of his magic in a more urgent voice than before, Jalal's body was once again covered by the bright brilliance. His figure once again turned into a meteor, fiercely breaking free from Noah, and in a breath, retreated rapidly. Under the sharp sound of breaking the air, Jalal, who had turned into a meteor, seemed to want to surround Noah. With Noah as the center, he drew a big circle, blocking all of Noah's escape routes with his own strength, and his speed was getting faster and faster. This Jalal is really something. Even if his strength is not as good as Bio's, his speed is already above Bio's. While a touch of surprise flashed in his heart, Noah felt a chill on his back. He immediately clenched his fist and fiercely smashed it behind him without hesitation. Bang! His fist swung through the air, and a figure just happened to flash out from behind Noah. His fist was faintly suffused with some black gas under the magic power, and when Noah's fist was about to hit him, he also swung his fist, and in a muffled sound, the two heavily collided. However, Jalal's fist only touched the ground for a moment, and the moment it collided with Noah's fist, he suddenly withdrew his fist. Golden light burst out from his body, and his meteor-like figure spun freely in the air, turning into a ray of light, leaving behind a long tail of light in a semicircle, and following a semicircle arc, he swept past Noah's body. At this moment, Noah finally let out a gasp of astonishment. Too fast. This time, before he could finish his words, the meteor-like figure came to Noah's back in the blink of an eye. He clenched his fist and fiercely smashed it toward Noah. With the help of the sensing ability, Noah noticed this blow in time. When Jalal's fist was only half a meter away from his back, he suddenly turned around and raised his hand to block. Bang! In another muffled sound, Jalal's fist solidly fell on Noah's raised arm, and a terrible force was released from it, causing Noah to stumble back a few steps. Then, he shook his shoulder hard and forcibly stabilized his body. For a moment, Noah was actually at a disadvantage. Chapter 404. After defeating Noah with one blow, Jalal's confidence seemed to have returned once again. His figure turned into a meteor and hovered around Noah, while his piercing laughter was constantly heard. No matter how strong you are, as long as you can't catch up to my meteor, you won't be able to defeat me. You'd better obediently become Jalal's sacrifice. Hearing this, Noah slightly frowned. Relying on his excellent sensing ability, he continued to track Jalal's movements, but his mind was active. Indeed, in terms of strength, Noah was definitely superior to Jalal, but if he couldn't catch up to Jalal's speed, he would also be exhausted to death. While Noah's mind was active, an oppressive gust of wind came from behind him again. Surprisingly, it was Jalal's extremely fast attack with the help of his super high speed. Show me, magician! Just as Jalal's attack was about to land on Noah, the incantation that summoned the soul and released the true power of the soul reverberated. Bang! A burst of cold blue flames burst out from Noah's body, startling Jalal. He hurriedly stopped his attack, manipulated his body, and dashed away like a meteor, putting some distance between them. The blue flames surged in the air like a volcanic eruption. At this moment, a black shadow cut through the air, parting the blue flames. Like a ray of black light, it suddenly shot out. Although the speed was not as fast as Jalal's meteor, the gap was not as big as before. So, Jal only saw a blur in front of him, and a figure equipped with two pairs of inorganic mechanical wings the size of half a man on the back, with a lot of black light spurting out from the ports of the wings to form two pairs of huge wings of light imprinted in Jalal's eyes. Annihilation strike. The air whistled, and a fist carrying a dazzling vortex of air followed closely behind, bringing a strong wind with it, and heavily smashed into Jalal's chest. Hiya! Jalal was shocked, but his reaction was not slow. He shouted loudly, and the black magic swirled around his fist like a vortex. Instead of retreating, he moved forward to meet Noah's attack. Boom! The fist collided with the fist, and a powerful force burst out that caused the air to tremble a little. However, the power of Noah's annihilation strike was obviously stronger than Jalal's fist, which was strengthened by magic. When the two fists collided, a strong impact was transmitted to Jalal's arm, and then through Jalal's arm, it hit Jalal's body. After suffering such a heavy blow, Jalal let out a muffled groan from his throat. Golden light flickered on his body, and his light-like figure flashed away like a fish. Seeing this, Noah knew that he could not catch up with Jalal even with the help of the death feather form, so he did not pursue. Instead, he took a step back, squinted his eyes, and fully activated his sensing ability to detect Jalal's position. Apart from Crush, do you still have that kind of magic hidden? Jalal's angry voice came from all around. Obviously, the previous blow had caused him some damage, which made him a little angry. But even so, can you catch up with me? As soon as he finished his words, a meteor flew out in a spiral and actually shot toward the sky. At this moment, a burst of majestic magic burst out from Jalal, who had turned into a meteor. Ding 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 ding. Under Noah's gaze, a golden magic array suddenly appeared around Jalal and arranged itself like the Big Dipper. It contained an extremely terrifying attack, and the air was whistling. Accept the punishment of the Big Dipper. While Jalal, who was floating in the air, let out a wild laugh, the 7 magic arrays in the sky that looked like the Big Dipper connected with each other, and the whole array burst out a dazzling light. Feeling that the magic arrays contained extraordinary power, Noah squinted his eyes, and the death feather on his back spewed out a large amount of black light, forming a pushing force that made Noah's body disappear in an instant. 7-star sword. Just as Noah's body disappeared, the light in the magic arrays in the sky exploded. Several resplendent rays of light descended from the sky, landing heavily on the hard rocky ground. Boom! Immediately, the ground that was struck by the resplendent light directly exploded with a deafening boom, stirring up a dense cloud of dust and shockwaves that blew in all directions. Oh, this level of attack can't catch up with your current speed? But my celestial magic is not only at this level. Jalal, who was floating in the sky, laughed loudly and made a hand gesture. The magic arrays that looked like the Big Dipper flashed again. 7-star sword rain. The moment his words fell, the magic arrays in the sky immediately burst into a strong light, and the strong light turned into rays of light, like raindrops, and burst out from those magic arrays, bringing along a burst of sharp sonic booms, like a curtain of rain, shrouding the ground. Noah's eyes flickered as he looked at the rain of light enveloping him like a curtain of rain. The terrifying power contained in those rays of light, if hit directly, 1 or 2 would be fine, but if there were more, even with Noah's current strength, he would be injured. Undoubtedly, this Jalal's comprehensive strength was not above Noah's, and was even a bit weaker, but he was able to contend with Noah by relying on his meteor, which could display an extremely terrifying speed. Now, because Noah released the power of the magician, the threat brought by the meteor was neutralized by Noah. If this continued, Jalal would undoubtedly be defeated. However, under such circumstances, Jalal used the 7-star sword rain magic, and each of those attacks was roughly equivalent to the attack power of a meteorite, which was really extraordinary. His speed was broken, and Jalal used a powerful magic to make up for his lack of strength, so Noah couldn't do anything to him for a while. Celestial magic was indeed a very powerful magic. If he couldn't find a chance to kill in one blow, then Noah would really have to waste time with this Jalal. Propelled by the death feather, Noah's figure rapidly retreated, leaving behind a series of afterimages in the air above the rocky ground. Pa 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 pa. However, as soon as the afterimages appeared, they would be enveloped by the 7-star sword rain that fell from the sky in the next moment and directly exploded. Pung peng peng peng. Under the attack of those meteorite-like attacks, the ground shook as if the sky was falling, and in the midst of the muffled explosions, one after another craters were blasted open, stirring up a lot of thick smoke and dust. Whoosh 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 whoosh. Even under such circumstances, the resplendent curtain of rain continued to envelop them. Ha ha! Jalal's wild laughter kept echoing in the air. Therefore, Jalal, who was laughing wildly, didn't notice that while Noah was rapidly dodging, the magic in his body was also crazily gathering, causing one of Noah's arms to flash with a brilliant light. Since Jalal had endless tricks up his sleeve, then what Noah needed to do was to strike a killing blow that Jalal couldn't resist no matter what he did, and break this stalemate that Jalal had dragged into a war of attrition. It was for this purpose that Noah chose to dodge and save up his strength. Jalal gave up on using meteor to deal with Noah, and instead gave Noah time to use a powerful magic. So, while dodging the attack of the 7-star sword rain, Noah slowly stretched out his hand. On that arm, a burst of magic power surged, and a gorgeous light burst out. Inside, a delicate pattern gradually emerged. At the same time, Noah softly chanted, "Gather, guide the fairies' river of light." Suddenly, the sky was like a calm lake that had a big stone thrown into it, stirring up ripples that constantly spread out. Illuminate, for the sake of destroying the evil minions. Violent magic rose from Noah's body. Finally, Jalal, who had realized that something was wrong, suddenly changed his expression. Chapter 405. It was as if the entire sky was shaking. Space rippled, and the energy between the heavens and the earth became violent. Under the gaze of Jalal, whose expression changed abruptly, the sky that seemed to be trembling darkened for an instant. Shortly after, bursts of starlight suddenly appeared out of thin air. Under the influence of the violent magic energy that rose from Noah's body, the starlight spiraled and gathered together under the influence of the violent magic energy that rose from Noah's body. Not long after, under the convergence of starlight and magic power, a huge, gorgeous halo appeared above Jalal's head. It was like a door to the starry sky, converging in the sky. From the huge halo, Jalal felt a terrifying power that made his heart explode with a sense of crisis. His expression suddenly became full of horror. At this moment, Jalal finally understood. It seemed that he had been a little too confident from the beginning to the end. The person who was fighting with him was definitely not a rabbit that Jalal could casually capture as a sacrifice. He was a lion that could bite back at him at any time. Before Noah came to the Paradise Tower, Jalal had always thought that Noah was relying on the golden wolf Bio, who was an external force, based on the information he got from Zeke. Even if Noah showed extraordinary strength after coming here, Jalal didn't think that he would lose to Noah. After all, even Noah had to admit that the powerful, celestial magic made Jalal almost have no weaknesses. Whether in terms of strength or speed, he was not a match for any of the 10 great Saint Magus masters. But now, when this horrifying, gorgeous halo appeared, Jalal had to admit it no matter how much he didn't dare to believe it. If he wasn't careful, he might be defeated by this person. "I'll admit it. You do have great power." Lowering his head, Jalal glared at Noah, who had his arms raised high, his entire body bursting with radiance like a river that soared into the sky, and yelled loudly. "But you, who don't understand the greatness of Jalal and the true freedom, can't win against me." While yelling, Jalal raised his hands up high and crossed his arms in the shape of an X. All of a sudden, streams of black gas emerged from all directions around Jalal. Like flowing black water, they slowly converged above Jalal's crossed arms and condensed. As the black gas flowed in from all directions, a dark sphere slowly appeared above Jalal's crossed arms, and with the addition of the surrounding black gas, it became bigger and bigger little by little. Inside the pitch-black sphere, a terrifying energy was spreading, and it was quickly becoming denser. Seeing this scene, apart from Jalal's character, Noah did have some admiration for Jalal. Even if his overall strength was weaker than Noah's by a few notches, Jalal's means were still very superb. If it was someone else, even if their strength was higher than Jalal's, if they didn't have the means to deal with Jalal's celestial magic, that combined strength, speed, destructive power, and killing skills into one, then they would definitely lose. Unfortunately, Jalal's opponent was none other than Noah. Just as you never understand why others can't understand you, others will never understand why you are bound by the so-called freedom and paradise you speak of. So, I'll return this sentence to you, Bathed in the river of light, Noah's voice reverberated. "You can't win against me. It's time to end this." Hearing this, Jalal revealed a hideous smile. "Then let's see who will have the last laugh." As soon as Jalal's voice fell, the dark sphere above his crossed arms seemed to have come to life. Like a heart, it began to beat, and the dark light on the whole sphere suddenly became brighter. The rich black light wriggled and jumped along with the dark sphere. After a while, the dark sphere suspended above Jalal's crossed arms had condensed to the size of a person. An eerie mist continuously rose from the pitch-black sphere. It was clearly formed from magic power, but the pitch-black sphere looked even more real than it actually was. As if trying to suppress the filthy black light rising from the dark sphere, the magic rising from Noah's body turned into a river of light and poured into the huge brilliant halo in the sky, causing the brilliant halo to tremble and burst into a dazzling brilliance. Immediately, the dazzling halo suddenly fell and turned into a stream of light at an extremely terrifying speed. It broke through the air and fell around Jalal in an instant, surrounding him in the middle. Dark paradise. Jalal's expression changed, and he also made a move. He crossed his arms and swung them down forcefully, and the solid black sphere suddenly fell down, wrapping Jalal in it. At the same time, Noah extended his arm, which was glittering with dazzling radiance and intricate patterns, toward Jalal and clenched his hand down heavily. Fairy glitter. Suddenly, the huge halo shrank fiercely, and wherever it passed, the space shook violently. Accompanied by the shrinkage of the halo, the space expanded above the sky like a storm. It was like the condensation of a star before it exploded. The huge halo shrunk at an extremely fast speed, and with a boundless momentum, it viciously slammed into the pitch-black sphere. Between heaven and earth, everything was quiet. Boom! In the next second, a terrible loud noise suddenly sounded, bringing with it a huge sound wave. It was as if the sound wave was real, and it crazily spread out from the horizon, stirring up the dark clouds in the sky. In an encircling manner, the concentrated halo that fell on the dark sphere suddenly exploded at that moment. Like a huge wave in the sea, it exploded with a loud bang, bringing with it a dense fire that was enough to form a sea of fire and a terrible impact wave that rushed in all directions. The fire waves that blotted out the sky seemed to have covered the entire sky at this moment. The thick layer of dark clouds was completely evaporated at this moment. Those that were further away were like mice that had encountered a cat, suddenly dissipating under the attack of the frightening shockwave. Crack! After a while, with a cracking sound, the edge of this world directly cracked open. The moment the crack appeared, the entire world was swept away by the shockwaves and waves of fire. Ripples spread out as the cracks rapidly spread apart. Crack, 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 crack. Amidst a series of crisp and resounding cracking sounds that made one's teeth ache, the entire world began to crack and spread rapidly. Bang! Like a mountain rock exploding, an astonishing loud noise suddenly sounded between heaven and earth. That was the sound of the world directly exploding. This battlefield constructed by ancient magic had finally completed its mission. In the most violent way, under the impact and fire that swept across the world, it disappeared, allowing the vast room on the top floor of the Paradise Tower to once again appear in the surroundings. Rumble. And under the impact and fire that hadn't had time to completely dissipate, the entire Paradise Tower trembled violently like an earthquake. The huge crystal in the center of the vast room shattered very straightforwardly, turning into fragments that covered the sky and earth. With amazing speed, the fragments violently shot in all directions. Each fragment contained a great force, shooting to the surroundings like bullets. However, most of these fragments shuttled into the attacking wind and fire waves, and were instantly vaporized into nothingness by the high temperature. Not even a light smoke was produced, and they were forcefully scattered by the ferocious air waves. Noah, who was standing on the ground, stared intently at the center of the attacking wind and fire wave with his pitch-black eyes. Some crystal fragments mixed with sharp wind flew past him with a swoosh-swoosh sound, but they were unable to distract him in the slightest. After a while, the impact wind and fire that permeated the entire space finally dissipated. Among them, a charred figure stagnated in midair for a while, then fell and smashed heavily on the ground of the room. The force brought by the acceleration of gravity even caused cracks to appear on the ground. The outcome was clear. Chapter 406. When Noah, Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miliana parted ways and headed to the top floor of the Paradise Tower to look for Jalal, they were actually attacked by the soldiers in the entire Paradise Tower. That was to be expected. Jalal had installed magic crystals in the entire Paradise Tower for surveillance. Although he couldn't say that he could clearly see every move of everyone in the Paradise Tower, he could at least know where they were. Jalal judged that with his current strength, he would not be able to deal with Noah's golden wolf, Bo, who was able to kill Joseph. Before summoning his thought clone, Jalal had yet to summon back his thought clone. Therefore, in order to buy time to construct a battlefield and restrict Noah's golden wolf Bo's ancient magic, Jalal had to restrain Noah. After all, to be able to construct another space and set rules that were beneficial to oneself in advance, ancient magic wasn't something that could be used at will. It required a lot of time to prepare and carve a magic array that could construct a battlefield. Therefore, Jalal got the soldiers in the Paradise Tower to arrest Noah. Naturally, there was no way to really arrest Noah in that way. However, Jalal's goal was only to buy time, so as long as he could buy time, it would be enough. In order to repel all the attacking soldiers and find Jalal, Noah was delayed quite a bit, allowing Jalal to successfully complete the carving of the ancient magic array. And while Noah was dealing with the attacking soldiers in the Paradise Tower, Zio, Wooly, and Miliana, led by Simon, arrived at Fairy Tale. At this time, the construction of the Fairy Tale was nearing completion with the help of various magic tools and the magic that the guild members were able to provide. Outside the Fairy Tale, Simon and the other three looked at the signboard that was hung high above the main door, and their hearts were more or less filled with emotions. Is this a proper guild? Wooly's eyes, which were like ornaments on his square face, widened. What a luxurious guild! Because of the expansion, Fairy Tale now looked like a huge castle. Looking at the huge castle in front of him, it was natural that Wooly, who had been living in the Tower of Paradise for the past 8 years, would be so excited. Zio was also excited. However, she was excited about something else. Sister. Zio had a complicated expression. Is Sister inside? Hey, are we really going to go in and find little Elu? Miliana asked Simon timidly. It's all little Elu's companions inside. Hearing this, the four of them once again had complicated expressions. Companions. In the past, weren't they also Elusha's companions? Let's go in. Simon took a deep breath. We also have to make some closure for our past. Zio, Wooly, and Miliana exchanged looks, mustered their courage, and nodded. Pushed the door that looked like a city's gate, and the four of them walked into the Paradise Tower. First, the four of them saw a place that looked like a commercial street. After passing through the place that looked like a commercial street, the four of them came to the interior of the guild with the door wide open. They went straight inside and came to the guild hall that looked more like an auditorium than a bar. There were tables and chairs lined up. Rebbe, who was sitting on a chair and chatting with Lucy, noticed Simon and the others and asked in confusion. Who are those people? They're not from the guild, right? Lucy just noticed and made a sound of surprise. It's true. What's the matter? Naz, who suddenly stood on the table, said with some excitement. Are they here to mess things up? They don't look like it. Gray also looked over, and his hands began to unconsciously pull at his clothes. However, they do have a feeling of magic on them. They should be sorcerers. Be careful. Elusha. Hubby flew to Elusha, who was engrossed in eating cake, and pointed in the direction of the door with some mischievous intentions. Someone is here to mess things up. Mess things up? Elusha turned her head in confusion. When she saw Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miliana looking around in the direction of the door, her eyes trembled and her pretty face changed drastically. She was stunned. Welcome to Fairy Tale. Just as the people in the guild were whispering and Elusha was stunned, the signboard girls, Mira and Lisanna, came in front of the four of them. Excuse me, is there anything I can help you with? Mira greeted the four of them with a gentle smile. Do you have any requests for us? If that's the case, you can discuss it with us. Lisanna also greeted them with a polite smile. The president is not here now. If you want to ask fairy tale sorcerers for help, you can discuss it with us directly. We are not here to make a request. Simon stepped forward and spoke on behalf of the four of them. We are here to look for someone. Look for someone? Lise Anna was stunned. Sister? Zio couldn't help but stand up. It's Elusha. Is she here? Are you here to look for Elusha? Mira was a little surprised and looked in the direction of Elusha. Following Myra's gaze, Simon and the others also turned their gazes and saw Elusha standing there in a daze. Although it had been 8 years, Zio, Simon, Wooly, and Miliana all recognized each other at once, just like Elusha. Elusha. Simon, who had always been very calm, showed a rare trace of excitement. Elusha. Wooly didn't know whether to breathe a sigh of relief or a sigh. Little Elu. Miliana called out. Sister. Zio was the only one who stood there in a daze, not knowing how to react. What's wrong? Gray frowned and looked at Elusha. Do you know each other? Zio. Simon. Who? Miliana. Elusha didn't answer Gray's question. Instead, her face was filled with a complicated expression, and even a trace of fear appeared in her eyes. Why are you? Simon suppressed the excitement in his heart and regained his composure. He said to Elusha in a deep voice, Let's talk about reunion later. Elusha, we're here to tell you that your companion has broken into the Tower of Paradise and is planning to fight Jalal head-on. What did you say? Elusha finally stood up in shock and shouted anxiously, ignoring the fact that Simon's group of 4 had come here and making a living out of her various emotions. My companion? Who is it? We don't know his name either. Simon shook his head. All these years, I've been collecting all kinds of information about Fairy Tale, but there's no mention of him. We only know that there's a pure white emblem on the back of his right hand. That's the emblem of your guild. The emblem is on the back of his right hand? Or is it pure white? Lise Anna interjected. Could it be Big Brother Noah? Noah? Elusha was completely confused. Why would Noah know about the Tower of Paradise? Why would Noah go to the Tower of Paradise? Why would Noah have a conflict with Jalal? Although I don't know why he broke into the Tower of Paradise, he went looking for Jalal because of you, little Elu, Miriana said to Elusha. We told him about what happened in the past and how you betrayed us and escaped from the tower alone. But he didn't believe us, so he went looking for Jalal. Sister! Zio finally stood up and shouted with a face full of excitement. You really didn't betray us. Zio! Elusha lowered her head in pain. I think it's better to talk about it later. Wooly nodded. If we don't go to the Tower of Paradise now, that Noah guy might be killed by Jalal. Elusha raised her head abruptly, her original timidity and hesitation all gone, replaced by her usual sternness. I will never allow such a thing to happen. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.